Call this meeting to order. Good morning and welcome to the board meeting of Friday, November 25th, 2022. We will begin with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the lands which constitute the present-day Region of Peel as being part of the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat and Wendat nations. We recognize these people and their ancestors as peoples who inhabited these lands since time immemorial. The Region of Peel is home to many global indigenous peoples. We are streaming the public portion of this meeting live on our YouTube channel. If we happen to experience any technical difficulties with the live stream, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube channel. Before we get started, I would like to congratulate all the winning candidates from the recent municipal election, including our own board members, Mississauga Mayor Bonnie Crombie, Brampton Regional Councillor Martin Medeiros. Mayor Crombie is on another municipal business out of country, as that's why she's not attending today's meeting. And I would also like to congratulate our regional chair, Nando Inika, for being reappointed regional chair for Peel, the next term of council. Congratulate the chair. We look forward to working with the councillors from all of our municipalities on shared issues around policing in Peel. The next item we have is Section 10, Caledon OPP. We have officers here. We will begin today's meeting with the Section 10 Caledon OPP meeting. We have Superintendent Mike Stoddart to provide the reports from Caledon OPP.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone.
Sorry, 1 second. Roll call. I would like to ask all members present, except Mayor Crombie. And is there any declaration of any conflict of interest? Hearing none. And just quickly, the approval of the minutes being held on Friday, August 2026. Moved by Mr. Boughton. Do we have seconder? By Regional Chair Yanika. All in favor? Carried. And now we need the third quarter report from Caledon OPP. Superintendent, please proceed.
Much, Chair. Just like to start by mentioning that Inspector Mary Louise Kearns, who was recently successful in our competition for the new detachment commander position in Caledon, sends her regrets. She is way out of country on a long overdue vacation, and was actually going to switch her vacation to be here with you today, but sends her regrets, and I'll represent on behalf of her. Thank you. And I also have Acting Staff Sergeant Dwayne McKnight from the Caledon Detachment with me here as well. So thank you all very much. Just quickly to go over the report, we have, as it relates to public complaints, we have 3 new public complaints, all conduct related, and obviously inappropriate to discuss those details in this forum. And then moving to our motor vehicle collisions, year to date, we have a 35% increase in traffic collisions in the Caledon area. Last year to this year, we have 1 more fatal collision. From last year, this time was 3. We now have 4 year to date. And our property damage vehicle collisions are up 39% this year over last year. Some of the challenges include with the people coming back out of COVID-19, traffic being a little bit more volume of traffic, et cetera, we've seen that spike back up. As far as our offenses and criminal code, provincial statutes, charges laid, year to date, year over year, our total charges are down 36%. The biggest spike, or the biggest downside is the Highway Traffic Act charges, specifically year to date, down 35%. I can tell you that some of the challenges with these offenses. Enforcement include our traffic stops are down. However, some of our education and warnings are up. So there's a bit of a percentage variation for that. The other challenge we have is that some of our membership at Caledon, as a result of Freedom Convoy, had to cancel vacation and pushed everything into this quarter, as well as training coming out of COVID, mandatory training. And one of the other large issues that is the legislative leave that we have at Caledon, with members being off with legislative leave, maternity, paternity requirements. So having an impact on the proactive Highway Traffic Act enforcement. As far as violent crime, the largest increase is robberies to date. We went last year over the course of 2021 to 2022. We went from 2, and now this year we have 8. Significant increase. We believe these are multi-jurisdictional in nature, not specifically Caledon related, but we are working with our partners, Peel and York and Toronto, to identify the targets of these robberies. Our property crimes are also up year to date, last year over this year, approximately 10%. And we believe that's due to residential break-ins, people being back to work after COVID, and opportunities for people to be breaking into houses. Our drug crimes are down 53%, our prosecutions, 52 from last year to 24 this year. And that is a result of ongoing investigations that have not been cleared. So that you'll see that number as we continue to evolve to the end of the year. We're hopeful that some of those will be cleared by charge and change the percentage to more accurately reflect last year to this year. Our clearance rates are down 2% year to date over last year, which is in line with what we're hopeful to get a little bit into the positive percentage there as well. So that is a very high level, quick overview of the report. Open to any questions if there are any.
Mr. Boughton, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks for the report. The last Section 10 report we had, I think you were down 12 officers from what you should be at. Can you update us and tell us where you are now relative to having the full number of Caledon East?
Yes, thank you for the question. We are currently down a similar number. I don't have the exact number in front of me. I can report back to you on the exact number. I can tell you organizationally that we are in a difficult position of recruiting provincially across the province. And so we are very mindful organizationally that we are putting significant efforts into recruiting to be able to fill those vacancies. As well as some of our members who are off on long-term leaves. We're looking at the ability to backfill those from a provincial perspective, which will positively impact Caledon.
And that would be the direct contribution to 50% reduction in the Highway Traffic Act. So that's the area that gives first that the coppers are off the road doing things that are a higher priority. Is that fair?
Absolutely fair. The proactive work obviously takes a backseat to the operational calls for service. So unfortunately, members can't be doing that proactive enforcement.
Okay, thank you.
Just a question, Superintendent. The Collision Reporting Center in Caledon, how does that work? The same as we have here in Mississauga and Brampton?
I'm not familiar how it works in Brampton. Within the Caledon attachment, it is open, I believe, business hours 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. And it has the ability for anyone involved in a collision from across the province in OPP jurisdiction to report into that area. So if you're on a collision on the 401, but you live in Caledon or Nottawasaga or are driving through, you can stop there and report in your collision, and your information will be married up with the other driver and insurance.
Okay, thank you. Board member, any other question or comment? Ms. Coley?
I just wanted to mention that I did have the pleasure to meet Mary Louise Kearns last week, and we're definitely looking forward to having her, and she seems like a great addition to the team.
Thank you very much for those comments. She is an incredibly passionate member with significant experience, and I can tell you she's hit the ground running there. She has still a lot of case files from her previous job. However, she's been able to really make an impact early in Caledon. We're extremely happy to have her there. Thank you.
Thank you. If no other question or comment, may I have a mover to receive the report by Mr. Boughton, seconder by Ms. Coley, all in favor? Carried unanimously. This concludes the Section 10 Caledon OPP agenda. Thank you, Superintendent, for taking the time to attend. We will now begin the Peel Police Services Board meeting of November 25th, 2022. Again, roll call, all members present except Mayor Crombie. Is there any declaration of conflict of interest? Seeing, hearing none. Now we move on to the updates from the chief. And I know one of the updates will be on the topic of car thefts. Following the update, I would like to say a few things about this issue as well. Chief, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. And before we speak to that matter, I'm going to have Deputy Chief Mark Andrews provide an operational update, and then we'll hand it over to Deputy Milovich.
Thank you, Chief. Through the chair to the board, I'd like to update the board on two projects that have concluded during the period between our last board meeting and today's meeting. Project Erase, eliminate racing activity on streets everywhere, and Project Noisemaker, which is a related project that was ran simultaneously. So Project Erase is a joint forces project. We partner with agencies across the GTA, Toronto PS, York, Hamilton, and the OPP, and the Ministry of Transportation. The project ran from May 1st to October 22nd, and it's a strategic enforcement initiative aimed at eliminating dangerous driving and racing on our roads. Project Noisemaker is a PRP initiative that's run simultaneously with Project Erase, with the purpose of targeting vehicles that have modified muffler systems. The two are correlated. During the project, we analyzed data. We utilized a number of police techniques and police tactics, calls for service, and these tactics allowed us to identify hotspot locations for racers where they gathered and where they took part in racing activities. We targeted these areas, deployed significant resources, and we were able to see a reduction not only in the number of community complaints, but in the racing activity. Anecdotally, the racers organize themselves on social media, like everyone else these days, and we monitor those activities. I'm not revealing any secrets here, and there was an intentional push by street racers to avoid the region of Peel and go elsewhere. Just to give you some context, we investigated over 2,000 vehicles, laid in excess of 2,000 related charges, numerous criminal code charges as well. And as I said, we saw a reduction in the number of community complaints and street racing activity. Thank you. Subject to questions.
Thank you, Mark. And just to highlight the fact that with all our urban pressures, road safety, is one of the number one things. And, Board Member Medeiros, I'm sure, in the last while, that was a common complaint. And appreciate the work of our people 24/7. And, our job's not to displace it. We want to mitigate the complaints that we're getting. So thank you to Staff Super McKenna too and your teams. Thank you. Nick?
Thank you, Chief, and through the chair. Good morning, board members. It is, I really appreciate the opportunity to provide an update on this. I think auto theft for the region of Peel and really throughout the province and the country remains one of our top priorities and certainly one of the most prevalent concerns from our community. And very quickly, I think it's probably valuable to share. Oftentimes when we hear concerns from the community, they bin car theft into one space. And so before I begin and share some of the stats, what I would like to do again is remind particularly people watching today the difference. And really what we're talking about here is organized car theft. And organized car theft can be best thought of as occurring in two separate areas. One are the carjackings that often grab attention, and carjackings are the taking of a vehicle through the use of or threat of violence. The other type of auto theft that we're seeing becoming very prevalent are car relays, auto theft, where these are the auto thefts where a person goes to bed at night, wakes up in the morning and finds their car unfortunately gone for their driveway or from their driveway. So currently, carjackings in Peel are up by 45%. Auto thefts are up by 30%. And so, in congruent with the community concerns, the data would support that this is an issue. And we've spoken about this before. I also want to provide the board and the community with some reassurance that we recognize it's an issue and have invested in it in a way that's commensurate to those pressures. Over the course of the last 7 years, we've engaged in 7 large-scale, either Peel-led or joint forces operations that have been oriented towards organized car theft. Since our last board meeting, we have announced and completed 2 of those investigations. The first one was Project Decker, and that was announced in late September. Project Decker was oriented towards a group that were targeting homes and communities in Peel for carjackings and also involved in home invasions. It resulted in and supported Project Myra, which I believe I reported on during the last board meeting. Resulted in millions of dollars of vehicles being recovered, multiple people being charged, and really, I believe, made a difference, but it wasn't enough. We have just recently announced the results of another joint forces operation where we participated with our Greater Toronto Area partners, and that was Project GTA. There were 16 arrests, 116 charges laid, and over $1 million in vehicles that were recovered that were taken as a result of carjackings. Now, again, we often talk about, the fact that as a police service, it's important that we engage in enforcement activities, but we also recognize that particularly when we talk about car theft and the reason for the increase in car thefts, enforcement alone is never going to be enough. So we've also engaged heavily in some of the other areas of community safety and well-being planning, that being prevention, education, social development, because if we invest exclusively in enforcement, it leaves a gap and we continue to experience these problems, which we see today. Examples of some of the preventative efforts that our service has taken, which I think are also important or equally as important to highlight as the investigative efforts, are we have a heavy social media campaign where we're encouraging residents to take measures to protect themselves from being victims of car theft or organized car theft. You may have seen on social media our Twitter profile, the 9 p.m. routine. Urge people to lock their cars in garages if possible, anti-theft devices being deployed in their cars, but also removing valuables and really just trying to make their vehicle a more difficult target for the people that are attending our community and targeting our residents. In addition, November is Crime Prevention Month. As part of that, we've had officers attend high theft areas and engage in the Lock It or Lose It campaign, really promote the idea of how important prevention and education is for our residents in protecting themselves from car theft. I'm also happy to report that we've been working closely and have just recently initiated some relationships with our RCMP liaison officers who are in other countries, which we have identified as being ports or points of entry for a lot of the vehicles that are leaving. From those meetings, which we just started at the beginning of November, we have agreed to work towards repatriating recovered assets that are located in other countries, because the vast majority of vehicles that are taken through organized crime, auto thefts, find their ways out of the country. So it's important for us to be able to continue to pursue those. In addition, we're going to use those relationships to obtain information on business and persons of interest in Canada for stolen exportation, which again is another critical piece in our plan and our strategy. So all this to say, we're working very heavily in making sure that the strategy that we've developed towards organized crime theft is well balanced. Emergency response, mitigating the risk, prevention, and social development. But with that being said, you'll recall I opened up with some of the stats that are still occurring. It still leaves opportunity for us. There's still an opportunity for us to do more, because the reality is we're still having cars taken from people's driveways and taken from people at levels higher than we can tolerate. And that concludes my update. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, deputies, and thank you, Chief. As chair, on behalf of the board, I have been advocating about the increased action to address car theft. Earlier in the spring, many of the board members and the public knows that I introduced a motion to our police services board, which was unanimously supported by my board colleagues, to work with Chief Dariappa and Peel Region Police on concrete measures to reduce the car thefts in Peel. On a side note, I personally went to the many media outlets, wrote down the letters to all MPs in Peel and MPPs. So if we have a joint approach to address this issue. With the focus on a cross-sectoral approach to this issue, I have spoken to the chief on more action on this issue recently. Now, moving forward, what we will be asking our neighboring police service to discuss this problem, as car theft and carjacking often cross jurisdictional boundaries. The chief and I will be co-signing a letter asking neighboring mayors, chiefs, and board chairs to have a summit in Peel to discuss solution to this problem. This is a bigger problem, even though it's a countrywide, but at least GTHA, the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, which is affected largely here. And this is what we'll try to put together more and more joint efforts to reduce this bigger problem. We will also continue to work with our federal, provincial, and municipal partners to ensure every aspect of car theft is looked and considered. Bringing all the necessary partners to the table in a collaborative effort will ensure we provide our residents with the safety, security, and well-being they have come to know and expect in Peel. I know, Deputy, you mentioned a couple of these good projects, and there were some issues of the rewinning, and any update on those ones? Because some of the vehicle may got resale, as it was advisory that if someone bought a used vehicle, then they need to check back, because unfortunately that was one of the cases as well.
That is correct, Chair. Project GTA focused mainly on an operation which saw vehicles stolen and then revinned. And one of the messages that was included in the promotion of the results from that project was how important it is for people to take additional measures, such as ensuring that their car isn't a revin, in order to protect themselves from it. So in that project, I believe we had 15 people charged, and 7 of those people were from the Peel region. So it gives you an idea also of the value of participating in those projects. But, you know, secondary to holding people accountable is it's an opportunity. It's a platform for us to share how those cars are being stolen and share that information with our residents and preventative messages like you just relayed.
Thank you, Deputy. And board members, I know you may have some questions or comment to make. As we discussed, that we will be sending out the letter to all the municipalities, the mayors, the chiefs, and the boards to have a summit as soon as possible, maybe early in January or whenever the time permits. The board will facilitate that. And I'm sure we will be jointly to all our efforts will lead somewhere concrete measures to stop this auto theft, which is going up, especially in COVID and after COVID. Any comments from it? Sorry, Councilor Medeiros.
Oh, thank you. First of all, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do agree with. I thank you for your leadership on this issue, and certainly Chief Nish in terms of organizing a summit. I would also maybe suggest, and it's probably I probably didn't hear correctly, but in terms of industry and sector leaders, be it the Insurance Bureau, also some of the car manufacturers, to get their perspective, because I think that's also the technical aspect of it seems why the modern cars seem easier to steal. So it'd be interesting to sort of get their perspective. Through you, Mr. Chair, my specific question to the deputy, and thank you for the update. It's great to see. I do know that having just finished an election, that was top of mind, and that is a source of frustration for the community, and auto theft was often the example. We had previously talked about, and it was great to see that you're speaking to your jurisdictional partners, i.e. The RCMP, regarding, and I know we had mentioned border control, and there was this, again, I remember that whole Fifth Estate, report where it just seemed so easy to get a car from here and being sold in Nigeria. And it just seemed, how the hell can you get cars so easily from the GTA, pass on and go on a ship? And has border control, was there any recognition of beefing up that area of border control?
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, I can't speak specifically to the resources and how the border will be resourced, but what I can say is, on behalf of our police service, one of the additional things that we've done is established, really strong relationships with CBSA, Canadian Border Services Agency, and use some of the intelligence that we have and expertise we have where we've worked in conjunction with them in inspecting containers. So that's something that we're definitely looking to enhance. The reality is we need to support one another. When we can organize ourselves in a way that is organized not by what's on our business card or the organization we represent, but what we're trying to achieve, and if each of us owns our role in that space, we'll be much better positioned to begin making a difference, particularly at the border.
And my next question, and thank you for that. My next question through you, Mr. Chair, would be around the penalties around, I know some of the challenges is that, I've heard stories of, and a police officer shared this with me, where someone was arrested, they spent overnight for auto theft, and the next day, as they're leaving, they just go across the street and they steal a car, and there you go. So, and I know we may not have the answers for it, but in terms of stiffer penalties, is this a crime that's not recognized or hasn't been recognized as severe as other crimes? And is that an angle we'd also like to advocate for, to try to get stiffer penalties in this area?
Thank you again for that question, and once again through the chair. The short answer is absolutely. The reality is deterrence is one piece of the equation that we need to make sure exists in order to begin unpacking this issue. Like, if you imagine the idea of organized auto theft, and what we're trying to do is identifying the gaps that exist that either encourage people to engage in it or allow them to. Deterrence, of course, would be one of those issues. One of the things that I think is important, and probably a great reason why it's so important that at the board's suggestion and with the chair's discussion, that we do begin to collect our voices and begin advocating and identifying where some of those spaces are, and then begin filling them. But definitely, deterrence is an issue that we struggle with. Equally, we also struggle with the idea that we're finding younger kids involved in this type of activity. So, I would suggest that perhaps the way we approach a 14, 15-year-old who's engaged in this versus a career criminal should be different.
Thank you.
Just to comment further on, as Councillor Medeiros said, even in the when the specifically the whole intent to write down the letter to the provincial and the federal member of parliaments and the provincial member of parliaments was to get this more awareness, because the Peel region, the Peel Police is responsible obviously for the Peel region. If many of these vehicles getting stolen here and found within the province or even within the country, it's so easy to track down. If and what the stats says that is shipping out, and as the Fifth Estate documentary on CBC showed clearly, there's been car to be found in other countries, and it's not going by the road to U.S. We shared the border with the U.S., but mainly through the ports. And I know the CBSA officers are doing their best and working hard, but if the ratio suggested that only 3% of those containers being inspected, and someone, it used to be what I read is 3 months to declare what you're sending it out, being shipped out of country, and in COVID it's increased 3 to 6 months now. If I'm sending a container, shipping the container today, and I don't have to declare right away I'm sending it out. I have 3 to 6 months, and then once it's already gone out of the country, it's then I feel for those people. They are suffering for this. Then they're dealing with their insurance companies, and then the insurance companies. Then it's become the matter of the insurance company, and it's for them, because property belongs to them, whether they want to bring back. But all I know is it's a big hassle for the community, and our region is suffering. The whole GTA is suffering, but we are addressing it. We're talking about, like, every pretty much board meeting. We were the first one to put this motion, write it down the letters to all politicians. Some of them reached out with like, there's nothing happening here, and asking more questions. And I don't know how much information we can provide them. Not to put the politics into too much, but the elections are over, and my commitment as board chair or the board member, I'll be more vocal and going into every media outlet possible and addressing it out. And I commend the efforts our police is doing, but this is a big burden we have in recent, I know the carjacking and auto theft was there before, but maybe the global shortage of this is unfortunately a business model for some maybe other countries, but we are, and our people are suffering here. Thank you, Deputy. Ms. Coley, you're next to speak? Thank you.
Yep, thank you, and through you, the chair. So first of all, definitely looking forward to the summit, and I think that's a great initiative to lead that. I do want to say that I know that we had requested, I think there was an update back in June, and I think even prior to that, there was an update, and I know we had asked for more increased education, to the community on how they can be more proactive, and we have seen that. So thank you for all those efforts, very much present in social media and other places. But obviously, it is very concerning after all those efforts that it's gone up, 45% in carjacking and 35% in auto theft. I'm just curious, in these new increased numbers that we're seeing, is there any patterns or just certain areas? I think one thing you mentioned is younger and younger individuals kind of getting into this. But is there anything else that you're seeing that, maybe could help explain?
Thank you. And again, through the chair, the patterns remain, and I should probably clarify in terms of the increases, the 45% for carjacking, 30% for auto theft, that's year to date. Over the course of the last couple of months, there has been a leveling off. And it's interesting you should mention about the trends. Generally speaking, we continue to see our auto theft hotspots being the same. And so they are probably many neighborhoods that many are familiar with that have slightly more affluence or more attractive vehicles in the driveway, but also areas in and around surrounding the airport, areas where people who have arrived at our jurisdiction in order to target car thefts can basically shop for the vehicle that they're looking for. And the reason why, or one of the reasons why I appreciate the question so much is I neglected to mention that we are also, because of the idea that there's a geographic element to this crime, we're also beginning to look at, we've struck an internal working group to begin looking at the responsible use of technology as a deterrence to vehicle theft in some of those areas. Again, this is very early stages, but to me, it's a demonstration of how we're trying to pivot and be as flexible as the crime that we're trying to address.
Thank you. Vice Chair Ratia, please.
Thank you to both deputies for your updates. On the carjacking and auto thefts, I mean, both very concerning crimes that are increasing, but just focusing on carjacking because there's an element of safety, the safety of residents when it comes to carjacking. It's a very scary experience, I'm sure, for individuals. To hear that it's, increased by 45%. My question to you is, why do people committing this feel more comfortable? I mean, I assume a percentage of this is in broad daylight. It's not all at night. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but why is it that in Peel people feel more comfortable to commit carjacking? And I have a question after that, I have a question to the other deputy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And again, through the chair, the reality is I believe the reason why, I wouldn't say people feel comfortable. What I would say is people are willing to take the risk and they're willing to jeopardize others' safety without care or consideration. And I think, in providing this answer, because it is a startling figure, 45% for carjackings, but I think it's also important that it provides some context with the actual number, particularly when you consider the size of Peel's population. So in 2022, we have had 85 carjackings in Peel. So that's an important figure when you consider the size of our population. Because, at the same time, I think it's important we're transparent as we can be with the community. We don't want to unnecessarily startle them with a blanket number of 45%. So 85. And again, in 2021, we had 46. And I would suggest that both of those years should have an asterisk beside them. 2021 was a very different year than this year has been because we've just come out of a pandemic. But nonetheless, the reality is 85 is too many. And you're right. Somebody is willing to put another person's safety at jeopardy. And I think part of that is, a number of reasons. Very difficult to give you one reason why a person would do that. But it's occurring. And people are continuing to do this crime.
Can I ask through the chair that maybe in Q1, sometime in Q1 of next year, we get an update to see how we're progressing on this and how the impacts of the plan that you've set out, both deterrent and investigative, are having. Thank you. And on the Project Erase and Project Noisemaker, something that's concerned the residents of Peel for some time, and thank you for the good work you've done there. You commented that as an outcome of these two projects, the complaints of the community have dropped. Are you in a position to qualify that? By how much? And my other question is, when we do a project like this that's driven by a collective complaint of some sort, or increase in complaints, do we have a cycle to go back to the people who are impacted by this to let them know that we've completed these projects, these are the outcomes, and these are the successes? Is there a communication cycle like that?
Thank you for the question, Vice Chair. To answer your first question, we do have quantitative measures. I don't have the numbers with me here today, but through our Road Watch program, that's where a lot of our complaints come in. And what we've been able to do is reconnect with complainants in the community to advise them on the success of or the progress on their complaint. Our Road Watch program was a part-time role up until this year, where we now have a dedicated officer whose primary function is connecting with complainants, is the intake of complaints, and then reconnecting with those complainants to highlight the outcomes. But I will get back to you with the quantitative measures of both projects.
Thank you, Deputy, and thank you, Vice Chair Ratia. Just a quick comment, my last comment on this, and then I'll over to Chief. Recently, myself and it's about a month back, some of the board members, we got the opportunity to visit Amal Kolb Center with the commercial auto theft investigative units. And thanks to Deputy Milanovic for your time and your team from the investigative sides where I saw how a pickup truck can be out of someone's driveway in less than 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and what method they use. And back to these manufacturers, they keep building these vehicles in the same way. Why some of those vehicles are not getting stolen, like some of those electric cars, why people are not stealing them, or some of the makes or models are hard to even, like if I lose my key today, I need to bring a whole lot of documentation to get my own keys duplicate back. But some of the individuals just get away because it's so easy over the time they come up with. But some of my board members were there as well, and we got to see the excellent work being done. Thank you, Deputy Milanovic, for showing us that. Chief, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to affirm the board's intention to bring together other municipalities. On a policing standpoint, Nick will attest to it that we regularly are working with our partners on projects, but as you've highlighted, whether it be strengthening border points, outbound inspections, advocacy through insurance bureaus or manufacturers, we certainly need the advocacy from municipalities, boards. Very much akin, Chair Yanika, to what we did with the firearms discussion with the big city mayors. Out of it came multiple points that we were able to bring to then Minister Blair from the public safety standpoint. I think this is akin to that and would really be appropriate. So we certainly, with Nick, will continue to advocate for that, and we look forward to the summit in the new year.
Thank you, Chief. Any other comments by any of the board members? And now, any board member have any other questions or announcements to make? I'm in that section. Hearing none. Item number 1, we have the first item is the approval of the minutes of the meeting held on Friday, August 26, 2022. If no question or comment, may I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Vice Chair Ratia, seconded by Mr. Boughton. All in favor? This is carried unanimously. Now we will move on to the deputations. The first deputation today is by Mr. Sid Knowles. Welcome, Mr. Knowles. A reminder that the deputations are limited to 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when there is about a minute left to go. And if you need a little bit extra time, you can always ask. Please proceed.
Good morning. A board subcommittee has been formed to investigate human rights and the Peel Police, and there are 12 points that the subcommittee must be cognizant of. 1, there is one universal standard for human rights, and it is the United Nations standard. 2, this includes the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, a legally binding United Nations human rights treaty that Canada ceded to in 1976. The Covenant's treaty status requires that all words contained must be given their ordinary meaning. So when the Covenant says, quote, the law shall prohibit any discrimination and guarantee to all persons equal and effective protection against discrimination on any ground such as race, color, sex, etc., it means no discrimination. No discrimination for any ground for any reason. 3, the Memorandum of Understanding between the Attorney General of Ontario and the Ontario Human Rights Commission states that the Attorney General and the Chief Commissioner of the OHRC, quote, share a commitment to the principles captured in the preamble of Ontario's Human Rights Code, which recognizes the importance and the need to reflect relevant international human rights principles, end of quote. The Ontario Human Rights Code, therefore, prohibits discrimination in the same way as the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. 4, continuing, this, quote, this MOU is to be construed and applied in a manner consistent with its guiding principles, with the code, and any relevant regulations and international human rights principles. End of quote. So the OHRC has stated twice that the prohibitions against discrimination in the covenant apply in Ontario by means of the Human Rights Code. 5, this can be seen in the preamble of the Ontario Human Rights Code, which proclaims, quote, "It is public policy in Ontario to recognize the dignity and worth of every person and to provide for equal rights and opportunities without discrimination that is contrary to law." 6, but the OHRC, in the Memorandum of Understanding between the OHRC and the Peel Police, ignores this prohibition against discrimination and unsuccessfully tries to justify discrimination based on the unproven concept that the Peel Police engages in systematic discrimination. 7, Section 27.3 of the Human Rights Code requires that, quote, "Every person appointed to the Commission shall have knowledge, experience, or training with respect to human rights law and issues." So why didn't Ina Chadha, the OHRC Chief Commissioner who signed your MOU, inform you that your MOU requires the board and services to violate the Ontario Human Rights Code and the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights? Why didn't she tell you that? Probably because if she did, you wouldn't sign it. 8, UN human rights instruments require equal treatment for all, so that if an individual or a group is not enjoying all their human rights, states are required to adopt special programs to ensure equal treatment for these programs, but these programs cannot discriminate. Special measures cannot discriminate. 9, the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, which Canada acceded to in 1970, was the first UN instrument to incorporate special measures. The convention targeted apartheid South Africa, and it undermined the apartheid position that assisting Black Africans to achieve equality with rights would be by definition unequal treatment and hence discrimination. Any program to move
Sorry, Mr. Noel, you have 1 minute to go.
all people into a position of equal rights is not discrimination. We'll skip number 10 and go right to number 11. Where does the idea that discrimination is allowed come from? 11, it comes from the United States. The United States did not accede to the Convention on Civil and Political Rights until 1992, and they did with a huge reservation that says that Article 26 of the Covenant allows the U.S. government to discriminate. So what is legal in the United States is not legal in Canada. In Canada, the law is no discrimination. And finally, the third-party academic hired by the committee must have expertise in international human rights law and how these laws impact upon Canadian law. The expert cannot be an OHRC Ina Chadha type of expert who is willfully ignorant of international human rights instruments. That's the end. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Knowles. Any comments?
I have a question.
Go
So
ahead.
it's not the first time, Mr. Knowles, that you have presented before us, correct?
I can't hear you. I've got a hearing problem.
It's not the first time that you've given us a deputation, correct?
What I have been here
No,
before about
yeah, you've
human
been here
rights,
before. Yeah, no, I remember.
but this is
I just want to
specifically
understand
for
what
me.
you're saying, Mr. Knowles. I want to understand. I have a hard time wrapping my mind around your presentation, so indulge me for a moment.
I'm sorry, I really can't understand. I can't hear what you're saying. I have a hearing problem.
Want to come up? You'll have to ask the question loudly. My question is, I'd like to understand what you're presenting to us. Because it's not, no, I have specific questions, sir. You allow me. You're trying to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are essentially saying that by ensuring everyone has equal rights, we are discriminating against those who already have their rights?
No, I understand.
So the MOU that we've signed with the OHRC, who are we discriminating against? No, just tell me which community, which
The checklist-
community.
The checklist that is in the MOU. Can only be achieved related against certain people.
Who are the certain people?
Pardon?
Who are the certain people?
I don't know. I basically,
So you're talking theoretically.
no,
Oh,
I'm talking about individuals.
who?
Individuals. I mean, you have a situation where somebody's going to get an advantage because they're that would be discrimination.
What if there is already someone who we know or we have identified is disadvantaged with the current process of the
It
day?
doesn't matter about disadvantage. You just
I would,
Okay, so sorry, through the chair, I just want to say thank you for presenting. But I will say, if I understand your deputation correctly, as a board member, I want to just be clear, I don't agree with it. I just want to be clear. Yeah, that's all. Yeah.
Human rights, talk about equal rights and opportunities.
Yeah. Thank you.
thank you, Vice
Thank
Chair
you.
Hatia. If you have any comments, you can please go back and you can speak, but any other comment? Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Knowles. Thank you for your deputation, I meant to say. May I have a mover to receive this deputation? By Mr. Anika. Would you have a seconder? By Mr. Boughton. All in favor? This is received. Our second deputation for today is by Mr. Bill Baring. Welcome, Mr. Baring. A reminder that the deputations are limited to 5 minutes. I'll let you know when there is about a minute left to go. Mr. Baring, if you need additional time, you can ask. Normally, I don't interrupt for 30 seconds or so, but please proceed. When are you ready?
First of all, I would like to thank everyone that given me the opportunity to be here and present the incident that I went through. And that is not only my incident, but after that, I have received multiple calls from the community. And that's why I'm today here as a voice of a community, as a voice of a resident in Peel region. On 12th of November, my son got involved into an accident. It was a major accident at the Automatic Road and Williams Parkway. I do have pictures of it, but I will hand in. And 2 cars were totaled, and my son himself made a 911 call. But for 2.5 hours, police officer didn't show up on the scene. I was in Hamilton at the time. From Hamilton, I reached back in Brampton, and I made sure that car get towed, and we were not guided by anybody that what is the next step to be taken. So after that, we came to 21 divisions, and we were told we cannot have a report written here. You have to go to collision center, which is on Shoppers World. And by the time we reached there, it was closed. We went there next morning, Sunday, and we were told that car has to come here. Because the car was at the impound, and we have to make that car available to go to the collision center Monday. And then I have to go pick up my son from the university to go write a report. So the reason why I'm here today, within that whole incident scenario, first of all, yes. Within that whole scenario of incident, if the police officer were arrived on the scene, this whole matter should have been fixed within the 1 hour to 2 hour time and determined who was at fault, and that scene can be cleared. But because police officer didn't show up, I have to hustle for next 2 days to make sure that our reports are being done properly, and we have to waste our time. Like I personally waste about 8 hours of my personal time from my business to just write a report, get a reporting done. And getting the car second time at the collision center, that is a cost that I had to bear from the tow truck company. And after that, we always receive a quick response to this kind of stuff. You know what insurance will cover, but I'm the one who paying the highest insurance in Brampton. All these expenses at the end is gonna come back to us. After I post that on social media, I receive 111 calls from the people who don't even know me. They're saying that we went through the similar scenarios, but we are not being heard anywhere. Even those scene that we had at the collision center, it's a very small place, took us 2.5 hours for our reporting to be done. And the staff there, very unprofessional. And the person who involved in accident, always mentally vulnerable and upset. That person need a care, need a guidance, which was never provided. And my son is 20 years old, and he was so upset at the collision center at the time that why these people are not helping me out, instead just considering that I might be the one who are at fault and they are not treating us well. So all these concerns are very alarming. And if I have received that many calls at the police, you probably have received all those kind of calls as well. But the system, the way it has been broken, that need to be taken care. What I would like to know from the board and the police, what measures are being taken to solve these issues. In whole Brampton, we have one collision center which is situated in 500 square feet space. There's no space to sit inside. They don't allow a second person gone along. I'm a father. I went along with my son. I was not even allowed to enter. Now the winter months are coming. If my car is broken and I'm standing outside, how long can I stand outside? What other measures has been taken to make sure that whoever comes there, first person is mentally upset? What measures are being taken to make sure they are comforted, they're okay? None. The staff, so unprofessional, rude, and they don't even bother talking to a second person coming along with the person who is victim. So I know 5 minutes, but I'm done with it. And at the end, this is one piece of paper I receive as a report. I don't even know that where to follow up to find out who was at fault. What further details should I get? There's no number, no information written on this one piece of paper that where to follow up and who to follow up. Thank you. If anybody have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bering. I personally share your pain, and unfortunately your son had to go through. First, I think I would go to any comment from our side or any comments from the PSB. We have Mr. Al Boughton, please.
Thank you for the deputation on this. And through you, Chair, Chief, I know that our collision reporting centers in Peel are new. We're about a year in on it, and we have how many in the region?
Through the chair, we have 3 collision reporting centers in the region.
Okay. I think based on the deputation, this might be a good time to have a look at the number that we have. Do we need more? Put it under the microscope with the owner of it, which we all know, and Steve Sanderson, that we can look at it. I think it might be an opportune time. I think there's also a bigger issue on it. This is Al Boughton's point on it. There's no fault. The no fault insurance and all that, I think, is a crock. That's my personal opinion on it, because it's like, oh, well, everybody's at fault, and nobody's at fault. They're just 2 smashed up vehicles, and off we go. So I think it maybe is a good time to, through you, Chair, Chief, to look at it, and I'm happy to participate in that in any way if I can be helpful. But I think we maybe need more setters, and we need to put it under the microscope, because I agree with your deputation. this needs to be fine tuned and it's fallen through the cracks and there's some personal suffering and, a young man at 20 years of age it's a pretty traumatic event. Obviously by the photos, it was a significant impact, and to feel that you don't have a voice, I hear you. And I think that we need to do some work on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have, that is Vice Chair Atia. You.
Just, first of all, thank you for coming and giving your deputation. I think many residents have their experiences, and it'll never be perfect. And so, to be aware to come here and present to the board, thank you for doing so. I think to our board and our service, we made a decision to outsource this aspect of our service delivery to the residents of Peel. Outsourcing, although it's common across different police services, it's never meant to reduce the service or give a, never meant to make our experiences for our residents harder. It's meant to make it better and more efficient. And so, I really encourage, and I also will be happy to support and participate, but we really need to look into this, I think, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say, Chief.
And thank you, Vice Chair Atia. Just a couple of quick questions I have. So every accident has to go to the reporting center, or if the collision is serious and more damage and the vehicle is not drivable, I need to have a bit of information on that. And if someone can comment on the hours of operations for these locations.
Thank you through the chair. And, we, first of all, Mr. Beering, we recognize the negative experience that your son has had if my child was in a collision, and we recognize the trauma and experience that, the way you've described it has. That said, Mr. Boughton, I think we would be pleased to bring back to you, a status of what's happened. And, just for the board's recollection, we're really literally the only region in Ontario that didn't have the capacity for collision reporting centers, and it's intended for low tier, notwithstanding the circumstances of this one, and we'd be happy to look into this particular incident. But we were the only agency that had no response to low tier accidents intended to be. The type of accidents that need to be reported are prescribed under the Highway Traffic Act. So there's a dollar value attached to that. The reporting forms are prescribed by the MTO. We don't control that. And unfortunately, Mr. Bowden, we are very much unattached to the insurance paradigm too, as well, which all kind of roll out of our response. Our ability to respond to people, as you know, in our region with the amount of vehicles we have previously, and probably Deputy Andrews can top it up. The wait times were far exceeding 2 hours to not have an officer be there. And you're right, Vice Chair Atia, it's intended to improve the quality of service. But like all things, there are outliers, and I'll be the first to say that. It's not perfect. And, as we'll go on to Deputy O'Doherty's presentation, people in Peel wait a long time for a lot of things for us to get to. And notwithstanding motor vehicle collisions, they can compound industry or blocking the roads. We've shut highways down. We know how bad it can be. So it certainly is an opportunity. We know firsthand from speaking to Mr. Sanderson at Accident Support Services, who staff those collision reporting centers. Will absolutely take away the feedback in terms of the customer service aspect, but it's an opportunity. I think he would affirm that we are far under-resourced in terms of collision reporting centers. And so with that, maybe Mark, if I haven't already taken everything you're about to say away from you, if you could fill in some of the data points.
Thank you, Chief. I'll always find some additional data to add to your comments. Just to respond to the chair's questions, we still attend serious injury accidents, criminality, and where there's hazardous conditions on the roadways. So we still do attend a significant number of traffic collisions. From an operational perspective, the three reporting centers, we have a pretty robust year's worth of data on the operations of the centers. There may be some gaps in terms of that we can identify in terms of communicating processes across the community and making sure that our community is aware of the process that needs to take place. And we'd love to get together with Mr. Beering and others who can help us inform that communication process. But from an operational point of view, we've gone back into the last 2 months, and the wait times at the Peel North Center are 8 minutes on average. The Peel Central Center, it's 7 minutes, and the Peel South Center, it's 16 minutes. Now that's the average, not to negate the individual experience, but those are significant savings in time in terms of customer service to where we were prior to the initiation of CRCs. And from an organizational perspective, we have been able to save 20,000 hours. Pardon me. We've been able to reallocate 20,000 hours of officer time for our officers to respond to emergent situations in our region by standing up CRC. So that's quite impactful. And we'll be able to, as I said, we've got a year's worth of data, and subject to the chiefs and the chair, we'll be able to bring forward a full report on that year's worth of data to the board, maybe in January or February.
Sorry, Councillor Medeiros, you're next, and then we have Vice Chair Attier.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the delegation, and having an 18-year-old son, I do imagine the stress that you would have went through and what your son would have gone through. What prompted me, just a quick question, and I'm not sure, Deputy, if you can respond. So one of the, I guess, comments from the deputation, which just I've been pondering. So in an accident scenario, a police officer doesn't show up. How do you determine fault? And so, and I guess that's kind of it. Did I understand too? Because that's
exactly.
So you don't have a referee to sort of say, clearly this was yours, because I also experienced, or indirectly through a family relative where, a car ran a red, hit him, and right away when police, and this was in Halton region, the person who was driving the car tells the police officer, oh, it was his fault. Just lucky my family member had a dashboard camera, which showed the proof. But it's just interesting because it seems to be a tactic that, right away you start accusing the other person because, how do you determine it? Any comment?
When there is clear evidence of fault, we still do lay charges. So there are occasions where charges are laid, but with no fault insurance, it becomes more of a process rather than a decision of fault and having the police acting as a referee.
So just sorry, you will, like, for example, in this situation, no police officer arrives. They go to the collision center. They say that, both of them will say that they're both not at fault. It was a big accident, certain value. Is there any investigation that goes after, or is it just simply it's no fault and you move from there?
There is an investigation conducted by the officers at the site, but independent of some other factors, it will default to a no fault situation.
Based on that. Okay, thank you very much.
Just, I know Vice Chair Attier has a question, just for my knowledge, and I know it's hard for you to comment on any particular, but let's say there's this accident and we see the vehicle. If now the family went to the reporting center, so someone will further investigate that who was at fault, or if the person was, for example, one of the person was driving, not in this case, just in general, like without the driver license or without any insurance. So what will happen in those scenarios?
There would be charges laid in those scenarios. If you're unable to produce documentation, there'll be charges laid.
And through the chair, in municipalities where there are no collision reporting centers and officers are able to attend, a lot of them don't end up in charges either, right? So I think it's not one in lieu of the other. In many cases, the end outcome would be the same on low-level collisions. I think Mr. Beering's is one worth us, looking into as an outlier, because it does appear, more egregious than it should have gone to a collision reporting center. But that's worth looking into. But in most cases, especially if an officer has waited 3 or 4 hours to respond to a low-level collision, it would have probably resulted in no charge either.
Thank you, Chief. Just, I know Vice Chair Attia has a comment to make, but just quickly, Deputy, I know this is the problem in not just us, with GTA-wide. What my understanding is that Toronto has only 2 reporting centers?
Toronto has only 2 reporting centers.
The entire Toronto?
Entire Toronto. Now, that doesn't, it's not like for like, so we have 3. And are there opportunities for us to expand those? Absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry, Vice Chair Attia, and then we have Ms. Coley.
I was going to ask whether we should expand, so thank you, you've answered that. There was the one comment made about a family member and someone being allowed to enter with you, and I just find in someone in an accident, it's very traumatic, even if it's not a huge accident. It was my child or my wife, going on their own would be very difficult. So is that a matter of space, or like, can we not, first of all, is it true? Can you confirm if it's true or not? And if it is it something we can look into?
It's something I can look into, Vice. I don't believe it's true. I don't know. I can't speak to the exact circumstances of this particular case. I'd love to connect with Mr. Beering and drill down on this. But there's post-COVID, I don't know of any constraints. Now, there may be space constraints depending how busy a particular location is, and that's why I say, I've given you the average wait time, but those numbers can fluctuate dependent on weather conditions, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't believe there's any.
Staff Super McKenna.
Thanks very much. Just to top that up, Mr. Beering, I'm going to look into this particular incident, why you weren't allowed into that particular facility. I can speak to the one that we have at our corporate headquarters. We welcome the family members in there, and we understand it's a very traumatic time. So I'll speak to Mr. Sanderson. I'll look into this particular incident and see if it's a policy that continued on from COVID. We understand that was certainly the case back then. And, especially with a parent and a child, it's something that should have been allowed to happen. That's pretty clear to me. So I'll take a look at that, and then we can talk after.
And just to add on that, Mr. McKenna, we all been to headquarters many times, and I see there are family members and multiple people walking in there. That may be one of the incidents, not that I witnessed. I can tell that I have seen family members on the left side of the entrance reporting. Thank you. We have Ms. Coley, and then we have Regional Chair Yanika to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Firstly, thank you again for being here today. And the pictures are pretty scary to see to begin with, so they tell a story. One thing I did notice that, and I think you began with, even when it happened, we didn't know what to do. And it's interesting because even as we're talking, we're realizing that's one of the questions a lot of people are saying, well, what do I do if this happens? I'm thinking maybe there's also an opportunity, because there's a lot of information today, even as you shared it, I wasn't aware, right? Like as we're going through it, the way you've explained it is actually a really good opportunity for us to kind of learn of all the different steps where there might be awareness opportunities, some education maybe to the general public of, hey, if this happens, this is kind of what you do. Here's where you go. Like, for example, the fact that, we thought we had 1, but we have 3, so centers. So I'm just thinking maybe that's a takeaway to say, just like we beefed up social media and education in a lot of our other areas, maybe there's an opportunity here to increase some of that education as we go, of course, into our winter months. It is something it could be coming up. And I do think I'm glad that they brought up the center of no family member. And I'm thinking also in the sense of it could have been a post-COVID or size, depending on the different centers. But it could be something to make 100% you can't have an individual coming in alone reporting such a such a situation. But I think that was one of my takeaways is as you were telling how many times you didn't know what to do next. And you had to ask that. So I think it might be just an opportunity for us to increase some education out there for everyone. And thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Coley. Regional Chair Unica, please.
Thank you, sir, and thank you very much for coming. Just a general comment, and I'm not speaking to your case, but I'm glad you illustrated, but just for the members of the board and our friends in Peel, there's always a strong distinction in what provincial legislation is and the role that we have in determining fault, and we have a no-fault system. So just so I'm clear, perhaps these are questions through to the chief, but when it comes to an accident, I believe the first responders that we sent really have two purposes. Number one, the ambulance folks and the paramedics. Is anybody harmed? Is anybody hurt? Does anybody need help? And if we've ticked that box that that's no, okay. I think when the officers show up, I think is, did anybody commit an offense of some kind? Do I have to charge them for an offense? Is there some other level of interdiction? And if the answer is no, I'm pretty sure we're done with it. If it's a bang up of a certain lower level, go sort that out. Under the no fault system, then it all falls to the insurers. And so the analogy that I give, independent of the police board, but having the privilege of running a $40 billion corporation here, the number of people that call me would say, we've been to your insurer, except this is wrong, and my truck was damaged in a pothole, whatever the case might be. The answer I give them is, if I today leave here and I feel terrible because I wasn't paying attention on the road and I run over a little boy's bicycle, but not the boy, thank goodness, and I call my insurer and say, I feel terrible. I took out the little guy's bicycle. Can you please play his claim? They will say, thanks for calling. Don't bother us again. That's our decision to make. We insure you. Now you step away. It is between the insurance parties, as I've learned over 30 years, and in a no-fault system, this is what we've ended up with. So what they say, where the equities are is we don't have to spend money on lawyers and process, et cetera. And do we pay them for half a bike? Do they have a deductible, et cetera, et cetera? We as the underwriters, if you will, especially in our system with the province, we're not in a position to determine who is really at fault here. If I understand, if there's a moving violation, if somebody was under the influence of cannabis, or then we have but only with regards to that. But I don't think we can then say, and that's why you have to pay for the guy's $12,000 repair. I think the line stops there unless I'm missing something. So if somebody could just speak to what my experience is, and if that's sort of the state of affairs in the province of Ontario.
That's very much the state of affairs. Where there's criminality, where there's things like no documentation, no insurance, et cetera, disqualified driver, those are separate issues. Other than that, we're in a no-fault system.
Thank you. Back to Mr. Bering. Thank you for your presentation. Today, we have heard obviously loud and clear, and we will see Mr. McKenna will look into it. And then hopefully, as Deputy mentioned, that sometime in the new year, there will be a report about the number of incidents and the number of locations to reevaluate, as I hear correct. If no further discussion, can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report by Mr. Boughton, seconded by Vice Chair Atia? All in favor? This is carried. Thank you for your deputation, Mr. Berry. Our next deputation today is the members of the community organization called Community Harmony Association Canada. May I have someone here? Welcome. As a reminder, the deputations are limited to 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when there's about a minute to go. If you can please, I don't have you, if you can please identify your name so that it will be easy for the rest of the board and our CMG to identify.
Thank you, Chair. And my name is Sandeep Sangha, and I'm from Community Harmony Association of Canada. And thank you, first of all, for giving us chance to speak on behalf of the residents of PO. As association, we are concerned about the future of our families, neighborhood, and the society as a whole. Our mission is to help in bringing positive changes in our society by collaborating with everyone, including all levels of government and authorities, for the mutual benefit of today's and our future generations. We understand no one wants to live in the area where the crime is increasing every day. So let's work together to make our areas safer for everyone. So we have some
fellow members sitting here in our podium as well. Manjeet Pondi, Daljit Lalli, Nahar Ojala, Beant Taliwal. And I would request Mr. Ranjit Taliwal to proceed from here. Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, esteemed members of this board. As my friend here explained, our purpose here today is just to present some concerns and questions on behalf of the community. These concerns and questions are being brought to you by stakeholders within the community who have been listening to our neighbors and friends and want to bring it to you. These concerns are nothing new that you don't know about, but at the very least, please take it as a barometer of concerns and priorities that the residents of the city and region are feeling. I have approximately 4 to 5 submissions to you, and I'll get it through that within the 5 minutes. The first is a sense of dismissal of concerns. So, car theft, robbery, and law and order, or perceived lack of law and order, is a concern for residents. And this is multiplied when somebody calls for help and they're on hold for a long time or nobody ever shows up. It seems to have fostered a general distrust, or if not distrust, a lack of confidence in the services provided by Peel Regional Police, in the sense that somebody will make a phone call for a robbery at their home or car theft, and they will never even meet an officer. They'll have someone on the phone. There's no follow-up, and there's no reassurances that there's someone there looking into this matter. It may be a lack of resources, sure, but at the end of the day, if there's no confidence in the people that are using the service, then there will be room for distrust. And the next time that there is something more serious that needs to be reported on, and there needs to be engagement by the community, that relationship's already broken. The next issue, or the next submission I have, is violence in schools seems to be an increase. At one point, there was an officer connected to each school, and that would be a direct contact between the school's operators, the principals, vice principals, teachers, to the Peel Regional Police. That's no longer there. Now, in fact, as concerned parents, we're finding out that when there is an incident at schools, a violent incident, that vice principals are on 911 calls on hold, waiting for emergency services to arrive. As parents, that's simply unacceptable. We need to have at least some sort of contact or some direct communication between the school and Peel Regional Police to provide emergency services quickly. And that would at least alleviate a lot of concerns and fears of, safety of children in schools. So my question to the board would be, is there a way or a method to have each school have a direct contact, a direct line to a person who can facilitate their needs on an emergency basis?
Sorry, Mr. Taliwal, you can continue, but just to remind, there's about 1 more minute in your deputation to go.
I'd ask, Mr. Chair, if you could indulge me with an extra minute or two. I won't take any more than that.
I'll just ask the board, is that okay? Yes, please. Yeah.
Thank you very much. The next is the long hold times on 911 calls. And, we're not presenting anything new. Mr. Bering presented his own incident. I can, from a personal standpoint, say I had a 21-year-old nephew who passed away in Brampton at the end of October. His parents were on hold for 30 minutes on 911 before they even spoke to somebody. And by the time EMS arrived, he had passed away in my brother's arms. These are concerns and stories that our fellow neighbors and friends are sharing in the city. Is there something that can be shared to show data about how many people are actually answering these 911 calls, how long wait times are, how many people are on staff to answer these calls, what the automated system that's queuing calls, what the parameters of that are, and how that can be improved. Data transparency can go a long way to shift the narrative that no one's answering calls, but if there's no data, then that's all people have, a sense that their calls are not being answered, and that's scary. Finally, I want to just raise a couple of questions, and I won't say more now. I'll wait for this board to answer them. But are we hiring more officers? And if we are, what are the milestones of when they will be hired? Will there be more night patrols or more resources available at night going forward? Community watch programs, they seem to be gone. Is there any sort of resource or support from this board that could be provided to help reestablish those in each community and show people how those can be done and within their local communities? And finally, are there any initiatives or programs being run now or will be running soon to decrease violence in schools? Any educational programs, any outreach to our youth? And that's all for my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Board members, any question, any comment? Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Dhaliwal, and I'm wondering if you're available to come to me to regional council when I present my budget in January.
Gladly.
Definitely. I think, first of all, I think we could spend a lot of time walking through all the nuances, and we'd obviously happy to welcome, Community Harmony Association of Canada come alongside of us with discussions in these spaces. I think the board, appropriately so, as we're going to talk about today, just to highlight that our capacity to serve the needs of the community, as you just heard, have a direct correlation to their ability to trust us. And I think that's what I wanted to highlight. On behalf of all of our members, the civilian sworn members, we want to serve the community. And in a region as big as ours, the reality is, and I think, not to water it down to a lack of resources, but capacity leads to our, some of these frustrations in many regards. So, that is certainly duly noted about our ability to be there to answer calls. And we'd ask you if you're able to stay as a group. Deputy Chief O'Doherty will be presenting almost right after you as it pertains to the reality of our situation in our 911 communication center. Our ability to resource day-to-day demands is another thing. I think as it pertains to the school-related issue, perhaps I'm going to ask Deputy DePat to just comment, overarching, and then, Mark, I know you can speak to some of the smaller points, but, in interest of time, maybe Mark.
Just quickly, Chief, there's one more deputation, I believe, regarding to the same school setup as well. So, but you're more than welcome to comment in this one. And obviously after that, Deputy O'Doherty will be talking about as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, and through the chair, good morning, board. It's certainly not lost on us the trauma and the fear that our community members, particularly parents with young children and families that have in school, feel when there is a violent incident at the school. Understanding that there is going to be another deputation that might have to do with the school resource officer program. I think just to answer your point on incidents at school and having a direct line of contact when there's an emergency, I just want to assure you and everybody else that's listening in the community that we have a response mechanism that was developed in partnership with all of the school boards that specifically addresses emergency response so that we can attend a school as quickly as possible, particularly when it's a violent crime, apply as many resources as is necessary, but at the same time ensuring that for other incidents that are not violence related, that are more behavioral based, that the people who we're working with in the community and our stakeholder partners are attending with us so that those students or the person in need is getting the services that they require. I can assure you right now that we're working directly with the school boards. Our superintendents at all the divisions have a direct line of contact with the principals and the superintendents of the school boards. So not to address matters not only when they happen and post-incident, but also emerging matters and trends so that we can support them so that something doesn't happen. Again, that's not to dismiss the fact that there's certainly trauma and fear that's happening, but we do have a very good program right now that was adopted and accepted by the school boards, and we're very confident that it's been effective thus far. I'll be able to spend a little bit more time on the SRO program once the next deputation is made.
Thank you. Sorry, I have two speakers here. First is Mr. Al Boughton, and then we have Councillor Medeiros after. Thank you.
Thank you for the deputation. It's great and well received by this board. And if you hang around a little longer, we're going to talk about the budget and get that through. Not to let the cat out of the bag, but we're going to increase by 70 sworn and 50 civilian, which is 911 and other areas that require more people at PRP in recognition of exactly what you brought up. So we are moving forward in a very positive way and to make sure that the service levels increase going forward. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee, and I'll speak to that in a few minutes. But this is a board that cares very deeply for this community, and we understand what you're saying. We hear this about the 911 and other things within the community, and we are going to right size the PRP to make sure that our service level is what the public demands.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Councilor Medeiros.
Just very quickly through you, Mr. Chair, and just to recognize these two individuals. I know how passionate you are for the community, and I know what you guys represent. But you know, when the chief made that in tongue-in-cheek, talked about you coming out to the budget deliberations at the region, you know, from a political overtone, one of the frustrations that I feel. We have a great deputation from you folks. You guys are passionate about the community. We want to put forth a budget, and we support a budget going forward. And the first discussion and the first feedback I'll get once we approve the budget will be that no one wants to see their taxes go high. So then we're in this quagmire from a political perspective. So what I would want is this consistency and support and advocacy. And I'm not saying for us that we want, you know, big budget, big impacts from a property tax perspective, but I'm just saying that from us, these type of public supports really means a lot from a political perspective. So keep being a strong voice, keep ensuring that our dollars are not wasted and are put into, you know, the support, and especially when it comes to, you know, I don't have to tell you growing demographic, like we're going through a tsunami from a demographic perspective from population. I don't have to tell you everything that's going on. So notwithstanding, you know, I really appreciate you coming forward, but we need that sort of, I would say, I want to see that consistency in support of, you know, the budget ask and adding more of these resources, because this is where our tax dollars really need to be invested, because that's what we heard. It's the top issue I've heard at the doors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singha. Quick comment from you, and then I have Vice Chair Atia to next.
Through the chair, Martin, thank you for acknowledging us. And yes, we do as citizens, we do understand your challenges you guys face. And definitely, as a politician, when you are talking about as a politician, we want more transparency and accountability for our tax dollars as well. And as citizens, I don't think anybody will agree for a tax freeze for 4 years, because we know our challenges are getting tougher and tougher. Definitely, city and region, they need more money. And I think politicians should make only those promises that can be filled according to the service need of the services, as well as you guys need to educate the community how we can make it safer, where the tax dollars are working in the right direction. Then I don't think as citizens they will mind paying the gradual increase, rather than you guys will come up with really ridiculous increase that we cannot afford. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Atia, please.
So thank you for presenting today. Many of the observations you've made we're hearing from communities. I mean, the delays and but one comment you made that I'd like you to maybe explain more. I mean, when Peel Police stopped the SRO program, I don't think that was intended to eliminate the relationship between policing, the police service, and the school management, and having, so when you said the school leadership or the school, the administration don't have a lot, are put on. You specifically said are on hold when they call 911. Is there a specific example that you're referring to, or is it just another general kind of observation?
Okay, thank you. Again, I was school council chair for almost 4 or 5 years at Sandalwood Height, and last month or a few weeks back, we had a community engagement night there, and it was really successful event, and there were more than 500 guests over there. And actually, my daughter, she just graduated from university. She gave me an idea, Papa, those elements who gonna create the trouble, they're not gonna come inside the school, right? They might be wandering outside or back in the trail or somewhere, right? Like, can you ask an officer just to drive by? I approached principal and vice principal, and the principal said that I have to be on hold on the Peel police number. She said, last time I was on hold on Peel police number for 33 minutes. So she said, either I have to call 911, which will, like, this is not emergency. She do differentiate, this is non-emergency. But then event was about to start, but she has to, like she said, last time I had to hold for that long. So yes, that means we do understand, like, it's not like, okay, she can, request someone, any superintendent on this, on duty, or anyone on duty that just, have a casual, ask the officer to just to drive by. So from that scene in particular, that scenario, we brought that into your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Regional Chair Yanika, please.
Much for your presentation. Just to set the tone, because we're going to get a further report. This is the constant battle, isn't it? In the time that I've been around, it's, these are the resources that we want, but what do they cost? Just after we've had so many new members come to regional council, I reached out and called, I think, all 9 of them and said, what are you hearing on the street? You've just been in the trenches getting reelected. And almost universally, every one of them said, boy, people are concerned about crime and policing, et cetera, et cetera. And boy, are they really concerned about taxes and inflation. And you see the problem. And I'm going to leave you with a thought too, actually. One of my Nandoisms over the years is, boy, would I've introduced so many more new programs, and boy, would I have had so many more greater ideas if I didn't have to send a tax bill out and get reelected for a living. And that's the fundamental conundrum. And the last thought I leave you with, there would be a bunch of residents here listening to everything you've said and said, absolutely correct. But boy, we need those officers for intimate partner violence, or we need them at the airport, it's the constant battle. We agree with you, but this is why we're here, to see if we can get it right, because I support you in your cause. But that's the constant challenge that we have. And it's invaluable that we have real people here like you having us tweak it in the right direction. So I thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, board members. Thank you, officers. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Having said that, may I have a mover and seconder to receive this deputation by Ms. Coley, seconded by Mr. Boughton. All in favor? This is carried. The last deputation we have is by Mr. Jagdish Grewal and team. Welcome, Mr. Grewal. And just a reminder that the deputations are limited to 5 minutes. I'll let you know when there is about a minute left to go. And if the second individual can identify, obviously, I know Mr. Sidhu is the second individual. And please go whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Chair and member of the Peel Police Service Board. My name is Jagdish Grewal, along with Mr. Ranti Sidhu and Kulvinder Sheena and Justice Rai. We are the member of Canadian Punjabi Broadcasters Association. We would like to take a few minutes of your time to register the concern of our community regarding violence happening in our schools. As I will speak, there's a screen out there. I'm putting the slides there, so please have a look at the slides as well. It takes a village to raise a child is a proverb that means that an entire community of people must provide for and interact positively with children, for those children to experience and grow in a safe and healthy environment. We represent the community, and we want to voice our concern in a constructive manner to bring about change by taking action. Our community constitutes the majority of the population in region of Peel, and we understand the pain that we have to go through on a daily basis. It is our duty to make the community safe for our future generations. However, If we continue like this, the future seems bleak. Next slide, please. To illustrate our point better, we can look at the data presented here. Increasing amount of crime has been reported in the recent years against our youth. The key issue lies in the fact that there is an open sale of drugs within our school premises or near the school area. Gang war have become excessively common. Students have to worry about violence while they step inside their schools, which has an increasingly negative impact on their mental health and has led to rise in anxiety, disorder, and other mental illness. The children, as well as the parents, feel vulnerable. There is a huge section of immigrant parents who are further disadvantaged due to the lack of information, awareness, and resources. There are communication barriers and cultural differences that need to be taken into account. These issues are pressing, which need more attention and active action. Next slide, please. Constantly staying in a vulnerable environment can have a far-ranging impact on the mental well-being of students, teachers, and parents. Data has shown that bullying and physical violence has been on the rise in schools and areas near the school as well. This is a very dangerous trend and puts our youth in extreme risk. There's also a notable increase in case of sexual assault and harassment, the most recent example of which is the walkout by the student staged on November 10. The students are concerned about their own safety constantly, which takes their focus away from studies and enjoyable activities. Every second, they are losing out on their childhood. The absence of the law enforcement is a serious issue and inevitably leads to the escalation and persistence of these issues. The next slide, please. Our report highlights how the SRO did a lot of wonderful work, especially in the early years when a small number of officers who were riding motorcycles put in a lot of effort toward the environment and toward intervention and prevention. The use of motorcycle further prevented the police car stigma. 9 high schools initially participated in the initiative, and there was regular communication between the police.
Please continue. You have 1 more minute to
30
go.
seconds, 30 seconds, please. And there was a regular communication between the police and the principal and administrator of the schools. When there were rumors of unrest, they would go up on their bikes and hang out at the lunch and after school. Numerous kids were introduced to them. There was no opportunity for a knife fight because the police was nearby. It is crucial that this program should be reintroduced because it surely has a number of benefits. The officers in the program should be properly culturally trained and sensitive in order to safeguard the students and their interests. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Grewal and Mr. Sidhu, for your deputation. Comments, any comments, or before I turn off? Chief, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Grewal, for your presentation. I think we all acknowledge, and we spent last night talking about the significance of being with young people and our presence there. And we could spend a whole morning talking about how critical it is for us to be in those spaces. I think we too believe that being with young people in schools requires nurturing, and you've highlighted some of what type of needs these officers might have and need to be to meet the needs of our community. We agree with that, and one of our approaches has always been to build a program that can be inside, outside of facilities, inside schools, outside of schools. We know that there are lots of opportunities outside of the four walls of schools to do that. And one of the things that Deputy Chief Andrews and DePat have been working on is rebuilding a youth engagement program, which we would like to bring back to our schools to say, let us in, right? If you can, if it's right. But that I think you bringing it to our attention, it is something we do believe is extremely important. I speak to, for example, in the public board director, Rashmi Swarup regularly, particularly about some of these, incidents that have, caught our attention recently. Inversely with the Catholic board, and we have, private institutions that, Vice Chair Ahmed Atiya and I have chatted about that require our space also. And so maybe Mark, I think generally speaking, if you could please address the board with what we're thinking as it pertains to youth engagement into the new year.
Thank you, Chief. And through the chair, I think it would be beneficial for Mr. Grewal and the members who've joined us here to also just get a very quick history lesson on how it was that we came about to dissolving the school officer program. It was not something that was done unilaterally, a decision that was made by the police service. In fact, there were several incidents of violence that were involving youth in schools, which brought attention to the program that we had, but also the fact that there were systemic issues that were happening, not just with the police, but other sectors where police were unnecessarily being called to matters that the police were not the experts in. And after an extensive consultation with school boards and parents and families, we decided that it was appropriate. And to your point, Mr. Grewal, at the beginning of your presentation, when you talk about the safety and the sanctity of the schools, we made a decision to honor that because not only were there violent incidents, but there were also students and faculty members who felt fear when they saw the police. And it's definitely a balancing act to serve the needs, the fears, the anxieties of those in our schools within those school walls. And it really gave us an opportunity, especially during the pandemic, to take a closer look at our role within the schools. We acknowledge that schools should be a place of safety. It's a place of learning. And at the same time, we wanted to make a commitment to our youth because we felt it was very important that we continued that engagement. So we found other avenues to do it. That being said, this is a perfect opportunity, particularly from your group, to start a conversation. It's a perfect opportunity to start a conversation with those that are responsible for the safety and the sanctity within the school walls. And we, as the Peel Regional Police, would be more than committed to participate in those conversations. From a youth engagement program strategy, the board should know that we've been working on one for a little bit under a year. It's not something that we're crafting haphazardly. We're speaking to a lot of people because it's important that we're very thoughtful, that the approach that we take is trauma and victim centric. And we're hoping that in the new year, after further consultations with all the stakeholders, that we'll be able to have something that would be serving the interests of everybody involved.
All right. Thank you, Deputy. We have Regional Chair Unica, and then.
Thank you. And I think the deputy touched upon, I'm glad we went over the history, but in agreeing with you at the time, much of this was discussed on my first stint on this board. And, I've got a different perspective on it now. It was very difficult years ago, and maybe it was part of my education, that some people felt threatened by a police officer at a school. And I'd have thought, no, it represents sort of apple pie. You'd think there would be comfort, but then you understand where other communities have come from and why that might be a concern. So I have a deeper appreciation of that. But fundamentally, what concerned me the most and still concerns me the most today about the benefit of a school resource officer is, in the absence of officers and interdiction and non-confrontational and human meetings with youth, the only other time you'll meet an officer is probably under unfortunate circumstances, like when he's at your window saying, insurance, ownership, and license, please. And you're threatened and you're scared. And so this idea that at a young age we could be with youth, and the first time you meet them, she is saying, "Want to play basketball in the school gymnasium?" That's kind of pretty good because you're a real human. And that was the real challenge I had when there was some pushback and we mutually decided that that was the case. So I'm glad that we are revisiting it. The other challenge was, and again, my blessing and my curse is I've been around a long time. One of the other pushbacks we had, and I'm wearing my municipal counselor's hat now, is it was very hard back then to deal with the school board because the school board would tell you, go talk to the principal. It's like Monte Carlo, he or she's the king and they run the place, and you might have this program here, but you can't have that program there. So if you, kind of hard for the, and some embraced it and some didn't. And I remember one of the other problems, unrelated, but you know, when school had concerns about smoking and health and kids smoking, some principals dealt with the challenge. Others said, go smoke in the municipal park next door. Well, can we, if you talk to the principal, it's up to the principal. We need to revisit this, it seems to me, for the fundamental point of view is, I love the fact that police officers come across as human. You're meeting youth in a very human, non-threatening setting where they are. Is it the right program? We need to revisit it, but the chief fundamentally is right. We need something to reach out to youth at a young age to make them understand we're here for them as well. So I think more discussion to come on it, but there was quite a history on the file of why we ended up where we ended up. Thank you.
Thank you, Regional Chair Yanika. Just a quick comment. We have another program with Youth in Policing Initiative. There's a provincial government, and recently we had the Police Services Board also sponsor some of those students as well, and Councillor Medeiros pushed for his leadership that we need to sponsor more students into it. But just on that note, earlier in the age, due to the similar program, we have our chief here and Deputy Chief Mark DePatt were part of those programs, and look, today they're serving as chief and deputy chief of this organization. So our intentions is always on that note, as Chair Yanika mentioned, but to understand your concern loud and clear. As Deputy said, they're looking forward to bring in some with the new approach. Any other comment, having said that, by anyone or from the deputation? Mr. Sidhu, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Actually, last night was the parent council meeting at Castlebrook Secondary School, and the first time more than 50 families attend that meeting. My son is also there in grade 12. They are afraid, all the parents. And you know, this program was wonderful. It's a human psyche, you know, whenever you are speeding and you saw the police car, you start behaving. In that particular school, we have around 2,000 students. And those 2,000 students, they have one recess time. And, you know, when the police was there, you know, in uniform especially, they are, you know, getting friendly to police, and, you know, they just, you know, start behaving. And these days, you know, mainly those sensitive schools like, you know, Sandalwood Heights and, you know, the Castlebrook Secondary School. So we have to have that program back. Otherwise, you know, because there are, you know, 2 incidents. One was stabbing and one was, you know, the shooting incidents. And now the parents are very, very afraid to send the child at a school. Thank you.
Thank you. The last we have Ms. Samira Kohli.
Firstly, thank you so much for sharing your concerns. And I think the presentation was very well put together and very concise. And you pointed out actually examples, which sometimes helps in our situation as well when you're referring to your concerns. I think one other benefit, and I do want to add, and again, we can't discuss what the program needs to look like or where it needs to go, but I think another big benefit now is, and where an officer can come in, is also the education and awareness. You know, while we've listed some of the physical, you know, acts that go on, there's the whole threat of online. There's so many other things that are happening with these students today, which, I know that the chair mentioned we had done a tour, for example, with Deputy Nick about different divisions. And I'll tell you, a large scare is the online perspective. Kids aren't even sharing that with their parents, but that is happening at schools every day. And that's kind of how a lot of them are being accessed and being pulled in. And that education awareness coming from the police, it's a huge benefit as well. So I think there's one is the presence. The other part that they bring is the awareness, because they can see situations, they can help educate. So I'm not sure what the new program needs to look like, but as we evolve the program and where it needs to go, I think it needs to be updated to what the kids are experiencing today. Because I think there's so much more that they're experiencing that I don't even think they can share sometimes. But I think in many ways they're much more easily accessed. And I think we need to help kind of get ahead of some of those situations as well.
Thank you. Thank you. If no further discussion, may I have mover and seconder to receive this deputation by Councillor Madero, second by Ms. Coley. All in favor? This is carried. We will now move on to the presentations. Item 3.1 is Peel Regional Police and PWC communication presentation. Chief, would you like to introduce the presenters?
Yes, it'll be Deputy Chief Anthony O'Doherty.
Good morning, PSP members. Thank you for indulging us for, we have 20 minutes set aside for this presentation. I'm sure we will get through it before that. But in light of the deputations made today, the discussions that have already been had, I can tell you right now, this is very topical and timely. Also with the presentation that will come after mine, I think you will find a direct correlation between what I am presenting you today and surely what we will be looking for support on. I believe we have on the line Mr. Adam Mashia. Adam, I see you up on the screen there. Can you just acknowledge that you hear and see us?
Yes, hi. See you, everybody for today.
Okay, so you're cutting out a little bit. So maybe we'll just, as I carry on, Adam, I'll ask you to inject as we go, and we'll see if we can get through some of those technical issues. First of all, I just want to thank the chief. Last night, Chief, you directly acknowledged our 911 communicators, and it was very refreshing to see, and I'll tell you why. These women and men are truly the unsung heroes of our police service in so many ways, and I'll get to that a bit more. Board members, I also wanted to thank you for attending our Communications Bureau on several occasions, and of course, setting up a meeting on January to come in and review the state of our communications department. So this is wonderful to know that we are provided the attention we need. I think the 911 call center sometimes is a little misunderstood in terms of what it actually does. And let me just reframe it for everybody right now. In the deepest, darkest moments of someone's lives, they call 3 simple digits, 911. And never during that time should someone ever have to wait on hold. And we heard today that waiting on hold is an unfortunate reality of the 911 communication center. And there are several reasons for that. There's an increased workload. I'm going to talk to you about that in a moment. Staffing shortages, just like the rest of Peel Regional Police, there's a deficiency in staffing, which causes an increase in overtime. More importantly, occupational stress injury, which I'll get to in a moment, and burnout. I need to tell you, our 911 call takers and communications members are some of the most professional employees in the entire province of Ontario in a 911 call center. We are one of the busiest call centers, not only in Ontario, but all of Canada. And for this reason, the compounding factors weigh on them each and every day. They put themselves and our communities at risk. The graph I have up here, the bar chart and the graph beside it, demonstrate several factors that contribute to why people are on hold when they call 911. First, let's focus on the left. And first, I want to talk about the area in the light gray. That is what's called our switchboard operations. When I came to Peel Regional Police to look for efficiencies in the way we handle concerns from our community, we look to our automated attendant. And what this does is look to automation and technology to off-ramp calls that would otherwise come through a switchboard operator or to a communications bureau, and we've done that. And that's the good news. But what it has done is cause us to focus more on the other three areas. These three areas are false calls or hang-up calls to our 911 communication center, our calls to other emergency services. So folks, it's when you call 911, you just don't call the police. We take the calls for all three fire agencies in the Peel region and EMS. And then the emergency calls. What I want you to focus on here is from 2017, and that's not listed on your chart, but it is in the next presentation you will receive. From 2017 to 2022, there's been an increase of 45% of emergency calls to our 911 communication center. We get, on average, 10 to 12,000 hang-up calls on 911 each month. Each hang-up call requires a call taker to phone back, get a hold of the person that has been calling to ensure their safety is secure. This is an absolute unreasonable amount of calls into our call center that takes away from emergency response. Now listen, just before I go on, I'm not here to tell you bad news. I'm here to tell you about our solutions. And it's not just all about staffing. July and December are our busiest months. They're also our least staffing. We have folks who are due time off, and in that call center, they so well deserve it. But in July and in December, our call rates go up 20% from every other month. So our focus is going to be on emergency 911 calls. And it's at this time we invited PwC in almost a year ago to do a study to ensure that we are future ready, not only for population growth, but what's to come with next generation 911. And I'm going to explain that to everyone today very briefly. So right now I'll ask Adam. Adam, if you can hear me, if you can come in, and to our PSB members in our community, you'll remember about a year and a half ago, I asked PwC to come in and help me with our IT strategy. We had 180 outstanding projects at the Peel Regional Police Service. We underwent an in-depth study and we focused on 25 core IT projects that will help build PRP and modernize our operations. Since that date, we decreased from 180 projects to 25 core projects and have executed or are executing 18 of them currently. And that has demonstrated an efficiency. In the same manner, I've asked PwC to come in and help us review our 911 communication center in terms of modernization. Adam, I'll turn it over to you for the next few slides. Thanks.
Deputy, can you explain the acronyms, the labels on the graphs and what they mean?
Sure. So on the, thank you, Vice Chair. That's a great comment, actually.
911.
So the 911 is pretty self-explanatory. The NEM calls are non-emergency calls. They're calls that come into our 911 communication center that simply aren't emergencies. There's an education piece there towards the community that I'm going to get to in a moment. And then you have the PSAP registry. These are calls that actually are between the emergency services once we receive a call. So once we receive a call, we may have to call EMS, we may have to call fire. There's an exchange of information. That's the time that those calls are required on those calls. And there's technology that's involved to be able to decrease the amount of time and the amount of calls that we spend there as well. And I'll speak to that in a moment. Sorry, Adam, I don't want to steal your thunder on that piece. And then, of course, we have the NAQ calls, or queue, and that's called the no answer queue. Basically, those are our hang-up calls, and some of them are just false calls that we have to deal with. This is a significant burden. Again, looking to partnerships in our community with our academic institutions to find technology to eliminate or help us identify how we can better dispense with the time on those calls. And the switchboard is a non-emergency number. Essentially, it is, every time I think of switchboard, I think of the 1970s with somebody pulling a wire out of a wall here and transferring it over here. That's essentially what our switchboard operators had done for quite some time up until last year. And when we decided to modernize that, we reinvested the $700,000 into other areas of the service as an efficiency means. Now, the switchboard and call taking is a completely different skill set from answering calls at the 911 center. And so we'll get to that in a moment as well.
I don't know if I'm supposed to ask questions after, but what about how many calls we have not picked up? Are there calls that we don't get to, or?
No, there are calls that, as we've heard today,
just you always are on hold?
Calls today that are on hold. And, I think I heard today there was a call for 30 minutes and whether it wasn't, we would need more
It was
information.
not 911, but non-emergency.
Yeah. Our average 911 call time in 2022 is 26 seconds. That's unacceptable.
So we'll always answer the call, it's just
Yes.
a matter of how long.
That's right. Okay, Adam?
Perfect. Thank you. And if my sound is not working, please somebody just do let me know. I've tried to make a fix to my microphone, but not being there in person makes it challenging sometimes to see if I'm being heard or not. So thank you in advance for your patience. Want to thank Deputy Chief O'Duarty for involving us in this project. This is something that we've seen nationally and provincially that is causing challenges across different PSAPs and communication centers. And I really want to commend the team at Peel and the region of Peel for realizing the importance in addressing some of these challenges, in particular in advance of some of the changes to the technology that will happen over the next few years when moving to next generation 911. If I could just get the next slide, please. So our, one back, please. Yes, our approach to this then, Deputy Chief O'Duarty was explicit in his ask to have us involve the people in the communication center to be part of the solution. So we spent a lot of time designing a human-centered approach to the recommendations that were provided, and we made sure that we had proper consultation with the members of the communication center from all aspects to understand where the biggest pain points were and where we thought there was some opportunity to improve. As a result of our efforts, we have engaged over 75% of the employees within the communication center, and that was through various methods such as a large-scale employee survey, interviews that were provided in a group setting, as well as email feedback received, and we had an in-person brainstorming session where we designed what we thought the future of the communication center would look like to address some of these concerns. So very successful in terms of the amount of feedback and a very engaged workforce who is very passionate for the community in Peel. And we were very happy to be a part of that. One of the things that was that came out of that, and you'll hear us talk about it a little bit more in the coming slides, is the need for workforce management. And that is something that we do think will provide significant benefit in making sure that we are appropriately caring for and scheduling the individuals that are taking these calls to make sure that they can always bring their best to the community when they pick up the phones. To the next slide, please. So we did a lot of work over the summer. We issued a current state report to help us understand what is going on in the communication center today and some of the pain points that are being experienced. You'll see the three key ones here that are listed on the slide. First and foremost, there were people shortages. There's an expression from people that they felt that they are tired and burnt out in the same way that Deputy Chief O'Duarty had mentioned in his introduction. But also that there was a lot of outdated process there that they felt was potentially leading to some more work that needed to be done. In this year, everything any opportunity that we can find to remove the process while not injecting any more risk into some of these calls is welcome, to make sure that we're cycling through calls a little quicker and getting people back on the phones to be able to address the concerns of the community. Secondly, this burnout is taking a toll on the individuals within the communication center, and have also felt that there were limited opportunities for them to advance and develop their skills and see a future as a contact center employee or a communication center employee in the region, which has led to employee retention issues. It's currently a very challenging job market. Finding good people is difficult. Keeping them is well worth the effort to try and make sure that they are long-term, and that the intent of the people that come in is that they do want to help serve the community for a long period of time. And where possible, we should be providing them the opportunity to move up and stay with the communication center long-term. Finally, with workforce management, there's a lack of resources available to perform the key functions that are required of a workforce management team, and that those are key activities that are required within the communication center to ensure that the people that are within the communication center are being used appropriately. And it's everything from forecasting calls that are expected to come in so we can staff the queues appropriately, ensuring overall capacity planning to properly plan annually for the number of people that are required to service the demand in the community, as well as appropriate reporting up at both the management and the executive level to ensure that we're keeping an eye on the progress and any challenges that might be arising within the communication center throughout the year. If I could get you to go to the next slide, please. So we've identified 3 key levers then to help change the operating model to address some of the needs that have been mentioned here today in terms of answering and serving the community in a timely manner. First and foremost, there's been a lot of progress made already in terms of hiring. So a fairly large cohort of people is starting in the next little bit, which will provide some additional capacity in the short term. But the reality is that it takes about 6 months for an individual to become fully proficient in taking these calls and be able to operate independently. So in that period, although there are a number of people starting, it will take some time for them to be able to serve, with the experience of somebody that's been there a little longer. Looking through technology, which was mentioned before. Simple examples of that is working with some of the other emergency response agencies to look at how we can reduce the time in warm handoffs to make sure that we are clearing the queues faster, as well as, and we'll talk about this a bit on the next slide, separating the queues so that we're serving 911 and police emergency calls separately to ensure that nobody is waiting online due to a number of people being tied up with police or emergency situations. And finally, reducing the numbers of calls received and handled. So this is not to ignore or persuade people not to call. This is making sure that there are ways available for people to serve either digitally or on their own through the website or other forms for non-urgent purposes, that they're directed to that either through community education or campaigns that will allow people to understand when they should be calling which number, so that we're not in situations where we're handling calls that would otherwise be tying up the lines. I'll pass back over to Deputy Chief Aguardi for the next slide. And hopefully everybody heard me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Adam, and I appreciate that. So the methodology has been provided. The findings have been provided, and some of them are obviously not shocking at all. But some indicate where there's opportunities, not just in staffing, but also in process and technology. We're going to go over some of that right now. What I want to do first is I just want to backtrack a little bit to make sure you understand the context of people working in a PSAP. A PSAP is a public safety answering point. There's probably over 250 of them in the province, sometimes 400 if you include what's called secondary PSAPs, which are the smaller PSAPs in the province. And why that's important is the competition in the province for skilled professionals who answer, triage, and dispatch emergency calls is absolutely off the charts. And it is hard for our folks, after a few years working in one of the busiest call centers in Canada, to rationalize why they would not perhaps go somewhere else for occupational stress, for wellness, where it's a little slower, where there's some time, where there's lunch breaks, to be able to do that work and get paid just the same amount of money. And so the competition is in demand, and there needs to be some progress there. Adam, we're going to quickly go through the 6 areas here for our transformation that we think are key, that have to happen. And then we'll just be a couple more minutes in the presentation. First of all, the increased use of data now that we have switched over to a new system is available to us. The data will be able to show us not just where and predict our peak areas and calls, but also where the calls are coming from. And when I say where, I mean in those buckets of non-emergency, and then at what times and what type of technology we can use to offset those calls. Adam, I'm going to turn 2 and 3 over to you.
Perfect. Sounds good. And I'm not sure if it's just me seeing it, but the next slide, I believe the one with 6 bullet points is the one that we're referring to now. There we go. Thank you. So the second point that we're making here is that we need to investigate splitting the emergency queue into a separate 911 and police emergency queue. So what happens today is that when a call comes in, it's handled by a call taker, and if that call is meant to stay within the Peel Police, they would stay on the line with the individual and service it. These calls are typically much larger in handle time. And what that means is that if you end up staying on the phone for 20 or 25 minutes to help the member of the community, it could potentially block the line for somebody that's coming in for a transfer to, let's say, ambulatory or fire services. Those calls are typically much shorter, somewhere less than a minute on most cases. So by separating the 2 of those, we would be able to free up more time and people to be able to transfer off to other emergency services. The third point here is talking about introducing a workforce management function and then staffing the queues accordingly. One of the things that's led to a lot of pressure at this point is that there's a concept in workforce management called shrinkage that builds in allotted time for individuals to have vacation, coaching, development, training time. Some of the methods that are being used today don't allow for some of this, which is leading to the high occupancy rates on the phone and burnout by staff. So by looking to introduce this function, what we would do is then start to properly estimate the number of people required to service calls that are coming through, while looking after the well-being of the employees and making sure that we are allotting some of that time for their personal development. And I'll pass back over to Deputy Chief Laguardi for the next 3 points.
Okay, thank you. And workforce management will be one of the key roles, if not the key role, in being able to support our 911 communicators, certainly. We want to create flexibility with our staffing model. So that is identify a staffing model that meets the needs of not just the community, but the communicators. We want to adapt our onboarding and training so that we can more expeditiously get our folks onto the floors, answering calls, and being contributing members. It takes a long time in other PSAPs to completely train to answer a call and to dispatch. However, the volume of calls that come into our call center provides us an opportunity for our folks to get experience, unfortunately, in a quicker time frame. And then receive the training. Listen, we just told you we hired 22 new call takers last week. They start their training this week. But that means there's 22 trainers that need to sit with them and train them. And when you scale it to what we have on the road in terms of our frontline officers, to what we have in a small communication center, given the size of our region, it's almost undoable. And I just should give a special shout out to our Communications Training Bureau. And when I say Training Bureau, folks, it's 2 people for being able to just do this. And it's actually miraculous. And it's quite an endeavor.
Just quickly, Deputy, the 10 911 staff in our budget, you think that'll be enough?
No, sir, it's not going to be enough for projected growth. It will be all that we could train.
for this year and to the coming year, given the rollover. The chief and I have a plan that will see, if required, more bodies into the Communications Bureau, a stream that will flow from other areas as a gap. But we need to get some of these transformational pieces that I just went over in first, or else the new staffing won't even matter. We'll need more, certainly. I do need to go over this very briefly, and it'll just take me 2 minutes. I was fortunate enough to be appointed by the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police to lead the implementation of next generation 911 services for Ontario and for our police and fire and ambulance, and I do so very proudly. The reason this is important is because next generation 911 in 2 years will create a tsunami of data coming into our Communications Bureau. That data, video, photographs, and what have you, will have to be processed in our Communications Bureau at some point and then sent out to our officers out on the road. This is all in hopes of providing better services, understanding what an officer on the road may be encountering, what a fire or EMS attendant will look to see in terms of data and how they could triage and maybe treat before they get there. But this has compounding impacts on our folks that take these calls. First of all, it will take longer to process an NG 911 call. There's occupational stress injury from potentially viewing if that's the way we decide to go. And I note that we have the association president and the CAO here who we've been continually discussing about those impacts and how it will impact our Communications Bureau. And then last but not least is the space and the technology to be able to do that. The reason I put this slide up here is just to explain that to you very briefly. You'll see on the far left side, the NG 911 sources are going to be many. We're going to be able to still receive a voice call, a text message, a FaceTime call, most likely an Uber call for 911. That is all going to come in from our community. Then that will come in through a secure network provided by the carriers into our communication center. That's the building, respectfully, each of you have visited and I'm sure have raised an eyebrow over today. That communication center is currently not able, infrastructure-wise, to be able to handle the capacity we need for next generation 911. That communication center will then get that bit of data. Our call takers will take it and dispatch that through what we have already built here in Peel, is through our public safety broadband network. So that's the good news. We've built the technology to support it. We now need the staffing, the training, and the infrastructure pieces to move it out to our folks on the front line. I'm going to turn this piece back over to Adam. And listen, quite frankly, we put it up there. It's a very busy slide, but it's more the representation of what the final product of our study is. And Adam, if I can just get you to 30 seconds on this and then we'll move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So in a similar way that Deputy Chief O'Doherty had mentioned, the technology work that had been done previously, what is a roadmap that you can see here that spans anywhere between kind of like 6 months worth of work in the short term to later than 18 months in some of the more advanced components. So this is really about building some of the foundational capabilities then to meet what we were hoping to accomplish prior to the integration of next generation 911 technologies. So all that to say, this is a plan that maps out all the dependencies and all the things that need to be done to improve service to the community, many of which were already discussed today, but there are some others, as well.
Thanks, Adam. And just for the last couple slides. Everything we do here is to support a safe and healthy community. And it's no different in our 911 communication center. When we framed the outputs of the project, we wanted to ensure that it met not only the community needs and our members' needs. So an approach of continuous improvement for how we take calls and dispatch them is at the core. And this this roadmap provides us that. Mitigating risk, specifically through the utilization of data that we didn't have, will help us understand how we expand current programs. So for instance, we now have a fully civilian embedded crisis communication worker in our 911 call center, working with our PRP employees to off-ramp mental health calls that come in to civilian response and also a civilian in uniform response. How do we expand that program to alleviate some of the calls that not only our call takers take, but our frontline officers respond to? Prevention through our partnerships, and those are existing partnerships out in the community. How do we get them more involved in our communication center to educate members of the community on when to call 911, how to use your device, when not to call 911, and when a non-emergency number would be most appropriate. And then, of course, continuing to innovate. And listen, I know to some that sounds a little corny, but continuing to innovate in the 911 call center, exploring technologies that have never been explored before, specifically our academic partnerships that we've established, will see us decrease the gaps in service times. I finally want to end off with this. It's an investment for 2023. It's a plan for investment. Listen, there's a major need for immediate staffing today. We need staffing today. Chair Chadha, when you asked me if 10 was enough, 10 is not enough for tomorrow, but 10 will get us today where we're answering calls. Our folks can take their lunches, they can take a break. And we've already brought in 22, another 10 will assist. And just, if I could just say, when you hear me say we brought in 22, 22 gets us to our baseline staffing. We need an immediate need for staffing. We have to continually invest in the technology. You heard me talk about next generation 911, our community safety operations center, which you have seen when you visited, and you will see, and our infrastructure. We have failing infrastructure, and it doesn't matter how many people we bring in. If our infrastructure fails, we'll fail. And then our growth projections for what we need to do once we assess all of our solutions and understand what our staffing model is for years to come. With that, that concludes my overview of our 911 Communication Center. I want to tell you there's good news on the way, but there is a heck of a lot of work to be done today and over the next 3 years. Thank you. Subject to any questions.
Thank you. Any question or comment? Ms. Coley? Sorry, I have Ms. Coley, and then I have Vice Chair Atia.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I have a comment, and then I have a couple of questions for you. Comment is, I did have a chance to visit the 911 call center, and followed by a ride along. The part that completely, and first, everything you've said today was very visual that day. You know, I don't think if anyone's had the opportunity to go, what is so unbelievable is the whole region's divided into divisions, but there's one person answering calls per division based on your current staffing levels. And you were 100%, because I said, well, what happens when they go on break? They didn't have people in some cases to backfill. There are people that are working through to kind of service as much as they could, which again goes back to when we hear the numbers today about someone being on hold. You get through the volume that they're trying to get through. They can only, you know, I mean, based on what they can do, there's only so much they can do based on the technology they had today as well. The second part that was amazing to me is when you got to the ride-along part, what I was amazed is I saw some of the calls come in while I was there. By the time the call had gone to the officer I was with, those individuals had done so much legwork already to get to that place where the officer went in. That tells you that they're not just doing a call. They're now taking the next step to investigate, call, follow up, all that legwork that same individual is doing and still answering calls. So what is unbelievable to me is they were almost, I call them mini detectives, because I couldn't believe the amount of work that went into by the time they were receiving the calls when we were in the car together doing the ride along. So for me, what tells me is, as you put this next generation map, what's really comforting, and I'm really happy to see the word smart city on there, which is I think where a lot of cities are moving towards now. And it's kind of looking at all the different ways the data has to come in and the way, individuals can contact, but that can also make their life easy and how the information then, gets filtered out and how quickly it can be turned around. The couple of questions I had for you. One is you said you wanted to split the emergency queues. I wanted to understand that a little bit better. So when you say 911 and police emergency, so obviously there still has to be that initial connection. So the idea is that person then saying, hey, is this fire? Is this emergency? How are you assessing that at that point?
Yes, within the queue, right now, it's just one big bucket.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all the calls come in this one big, large 911 bucket,
Mhm.
and that's the queue. If we can, and there is technology to do this, and it's convincing our partners to be able to do this for us, and we are working closely. We can then sort in the queue of emergency calls the actual 911 emergency calls, ones that I'm not saying can be on hold, but do not need the immediate pickup. So, for instance, we had a terrible incident here in September where an officer from another region was murdered. And it's that type of call that will overwhelm the system, but that type of queue will have a call taker pick that up at the very first instance and be able to get an officer there. And unfortunately, in that case, the circumstances dictated a different outcome. But it's that type of queue, splitting the bigger queue into smaller queues that filter and prioritize, that will help our call takers as well.
And sorry, just the other thing too was I think something to just point out, we talk about mental health and crisis and the support that they need with a lot of these calls that are coming in. I was amazed that there was only one person in that entire place at that time to service. And I remember when I'd gone in, it was at 6 p.m. and at 10 p.m. your numbers, kind of refresh. So just at 6 p.m., just the emergency, not every other tier, was already at 1,900 plus calls. So I think it's really important as you're sharing this and as we talk about the next part of our
Sorry, Ms. Cully, 1,900
incoming.
total, like in 4 hours?
So not 4 hours, they go 10 p.m., they rotate, the system kind of goes back to zero and then they have calls coming in and it starts to calculate. So at 6 p.m., and it's not even 10 p.m., at 6 p.m., from the 10 p.m. the day before, they were already at 1,900, what they considered emergency calls. And that's just the top tier, right? So you saw all the colors. Imagine you start looking down the colors of how many other calls were kind of getting assessed. So, and that's, again, going back to one person servicing each of those divisions. I just wanted to make that aware because I know for me it was a huge eye opener. And, but I do want to say that I think with staffing levels, what the chair brought up, I do think we should definitely have that discussion to say, if we're going to do this, how do we make sure we set you guys up to do that? Because it's backfilling. It's not just training new. You're also just trying to get to the threshold. We need to get beyond the threshold. The population's growing, right? So that's not going to go the other way. So we need to be able to get you beyond the threshold at this point.
Thank you. We have Vice Chair Atia, I believe, next.
Thank you, Deputy. When you talked about the 22 new hires, are these positions we approved last year?
They're positions you approved back in 2017 that continually get filled. People leave, the job's too hard, and we are consistently hiring every year. I have here today Acting Staff Superintendent Rob Shear as well, who's overseeing communications. And Rob, jump in here if I'm incorrect about this, but it's basically the 22 new hires are just to get us up to where we should be. The 10 extra will be very impactful along with these other solutions. And we foresee asking for more, but the 22, yes, have been approved, but they're 2017 or 2019 approvals.
Okay, and sorry, did you want
to? Thank you, through you, Chair. I'll just echo what the deputy said. This is something that we've been working on now quite diligently for a couple of years to get us to where we need to be. It's a delicate blend of people power, facilities, infrastructure, and technology that's going to get us to where we need to be.
We have discussed many times the impacts of long-term and short-term leave and the impacts on, the number of people who are off duty because of this. How does that, like, I assume there's folks from communications who are impacted by their experiences. So what percent, like how many people right now are?
I don't have the exact percentage, but if I can share you just anecdotally, sir.
Yeah, sure.
And the reason I say they're extreme professionals and they work through it. We do have people that are off, but we had an incident here last year where there was a fire and there were deaths, and the call taker who took that call, agonizing call, couldn't even go on a break. Couldn't even go on a break. Had to get right back to the desk because we had other calls. And I guess the reason I tell you that is that person is still working today. And everyone has a different resiliency, but sooner or later, the stresses of particularly the 911 communication center will catch up to you. And we should not start from the place of when it's going to do it. We should start from the proactive prevention piece. And that's what we're ultimately trying to get to.
Just to, sorry, are you done, Vice Chair? Oh, please, no, I was just going to add on something to.
Yeah, you can add. It's okay.
Just quickly, not to take much time. And when you, Deputy, mentioned that they leave and then we have, and if I'm understanding it correctly and had the other conversation that the cost of living here is going up, and then if the same pay scale, someone is making X amount here and then cost of living is up, it's better to go somewhere in smaller city and making the same amount and where they can have the better life. If that is another reason that they're leaving for the other services for the same job they are doing here?
I think that's a fair and accurate assessment. I think there's other factors, sir. I mean, just the other day in a coffee with the chief setting where we invite members of across our organization to speak to the chief about, pressures. We heard loud and clear from a member that in fact was a deciding factor. Not so much the pay, but the pressures of the job and the ability to have a lunch. Have a break.
Deputy, if I, through the chair, if I can, a couple more questions. The question of diverting calls or the queue. So what are you envisioning? Is it like I call and it's press 1 if you're this, press 2 if you're, is that what you're thinking? Or what kind of technology is this?
Well, okay, so first, I think there's technology that is out there that hasn't really been adapted or tried yet that will use automation to assess the urgency or the need. And we haven't fully explored that. But let me give you another example. Many, or I shouldn't say many, there are a few PSAPs in Ontario that don't call back 911 calls that are dropped or hang-ups. They're essentially these days pocket dials. That's the current method of calling 911. That don't even do that. It's just a risk that the PSAPs will take so that they can get to the other calls. We have not made that decision to do that here because we feel that there are some instances where that may not be the case. And it's not just because it's risk to the organization, but we want to provide the best service we can to the community. So there's technology to intercept those types of calls, which at 12,000 calls per month alleviate quite a bit of pressure. Then there's technology that allows us to discern between an emergency and non-emergency, that other than just taking the call, but automated before it gets in. All that does is allows us to take the 911 calls faster, and that's a big deal. We've heard today that 911 calls need to be answered in a more expedient fashion. So those are the types of things that could happen in a queue and with some technology.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chief, you want to add on?
Just to prompt Anthony to speak to the vicarious trauma that we anticipate maybe attached to the observation of digital media when it comes through the PSAP.
Right, there's occupational stress injury, which will impact our members. And then there's vicarious trauma. That's how a member will stay on the job and then provide service back to the community. And with exposure over and over again, and remember, we're not just taking calls about a cat in a tree. The calls that are coming, we're having 470,000 emergency calls year to date which is a 45% increase coming in. This is the worst times in somebody's life. The same 80 call takers and dispatchers are hearing every day over and over and over again. And aside from occupational stress injury, that has an impact on the service delivery we provide back to the call takers. So, for example, a call taker could come across as rude, but what they're trying to do is get the facts and get it in a timely manner. And that isn't the best service either. And so the vicarious trauma, yes, occupational stress injury, the burnout, they're all compounding factors which, you know, require some immediate attention.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if no further discussion, we'll have move this report by Councillor Madero, seconded by Ms. Coley. All in favor? This is carried unanimously. Thank you so much for your presentation. And the next item we have is the one we are waiting for, I guess. Mr. Barton like to talk on this, I know. Item number 3.2, 2023 Peel Regional Police Budget Presentation. Before I introduce the chief to the presentation, 2023 budget, I would like to invite the board's Finance Committee Chair, Mr. Al Barton, to speak to provide some comments on 2023 budget from the perspective of the Finance Committee. Please proceed, Mr. Barton.
What an introduction. I feel like a rock star, but not as good a rock star as we have in our chief, which was evident last night at the gala, because he is truly a rock star. So thank you, Chair. Let me start by thanking everyone that has played such an important part in developing the 2023 budget. That includes my board colleagues that are here today, board staff, the chief and his executive team, the numerous members of PRP that provide input into the budget process, and a very special thank you to Carrie Lynn Holmes and Karen Dubé, both who are here today, and the entire PRP finance team. One of our duties as the Finance Committee is to work closely with the chief and his team over the course of the year to review and make decisions on finance related matters, as well as collaborating on the development of the budget on behalf of the board. The process we use to develop our 2023 budget began truly the day after we approved the 2022 budget. It starts right away. As a committee, we met throughout the year, which was great after the COVID, with the chief and his team to review the status and progress of our spending, how our budget is linked to our strategic plan, and how we are ensuring we are delivering adequate and effective policing in Peel, a community that continues to grow at a very rapid rate. While the word collaboration gets thrown around often, I can safely and confidentially say that the 2022 police budget was a true collaboration. Whenever we present the budget, I always insist on providing some comments in addition to the chief. And here's why. First and most important is to ensure that everyone is aware that this is the board's budget. As mandated in the Police Services Act, the decisions and financials in this budget represent the direction of the board via the strategic plan, which is being developed with important input from the chief and the police service. Second, as a board charged with ensuring adequate and effective policing in our community, I want the community and the thousands of members of Peel Regional Police to know that our decisions will always support community safety and well-being. As the chief will speak to shortly, this year's budget achieves the board's goal of keeping up with the growth of our community and the growing demands of policing in Peel. We are supporting the members of Peel Regional Police and ensuring that we're using the resources at our disposal to respond to public safety concerns, like car thefts, pharmacy robberies, and the increased pressures of policing the airport and the indirect pressures of surrounding Canada's biggest and busiest airport. The board felt that this budget is necessary and was approved enthusiastically. On a personal note, since I became chair of our Finance Finance Audit and Risk Committee, I've been struck with the knowledge, experience, and the professionalism of every member of Peel Regional Police that contributes to developing our budget. Once again, I want to thank the fellow committee members, my board colleagues, Chief, and the police service for a truly collaborative effort to bring you the 2023 budget. Chief, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden, and thank you to the board members. We know this is a marathon meeting, but we appreciate the fact that to police a community as big as ours, these are really serious discussions. People's lives depend on it, and the well-being. So thank you again for your support of the needs of this community. We too are equally as invested, and I too want to echo and thank Director Carrie Lynn Holmes and Karen Dubé and the full team, Mark, Rob, and everybody behind the machine here to get us here. It has been a long journey, and there are lots of milestones to go still, but we thank you for the time. And so with that, it's my pleasure to walk you through our proposal as the Finance Committee has endorsed their 2023 budget. I don't need to tell you, we are probably one of the most unique regions nationally. And perhaps, I think we who see the U.S. side too know internationally how the pressures, not just in, right across Canada, are facing communities, but we have certainly one of the most unique characteristics we can possibly have. Possible is, outside of Los Angeles, you heard me say we have the largest logistics hub in North America. Without a doubt, our growth rate, as we continue to see, and we haven't even talked about Bill 23 and its impact on the population, has here. We celebrate the diversity and the issues that we've seen. As you've appropriately said, Mr. Bowden, the 12.6 million that came through Pearson last year was one of the lowest. It was 30 when I got here, and CEO Deborah Flint has a goal of getting us to 50 to 60. And you know what that means for all the spillover for what we see in the surrounding area. Yes, we do have a contract that polices the airport, but everything outside the boundaries is all ours. And we appreciate the fact that the convergence of all these highways that bring people into our community, and I think Anthony, or was it Nick that used the term, people shop for cars here. I've never heard him say that before, but it's the reality of it. But it's what makes us vibrant, and it's our role to continue to support that and the demands that come along with it. The story I tell you, and I had an opportunity with the Chair Chadha and Mr. Storpe to speak to our new regional councilors. Chair Unica was there yesterday, is we want to tell a thoughtful story about our continuing journey on transformation, but also acknowledge the real pressures that are here. And we will not deviate from that. My goal is always, and I don't think that I need to tell you as much as I will when I get to council in January, everything that's behind the work we're doing. On the left side of the screen are our four priorities, and they're rooted in community safety well-being. They are without a doubt, themes that we've heard from our delegations today. We want to thank people that have come and actualized on some of these thoughts and sentiment. The right side speaks to our approach on responding to them. And it is, completely upstream activities that are intended to be the positive change that we're seeing in our organization. And these are some of the artifacts that, we can spend, a long time talking about what we've done here at Peel Regional Police. But it's not just an ask. It is telling people that we're being very thoughtful about trying to get upstream, turn the dial down on the pressures. Anthony spoke to you about the need for in our communications. And while he's telling the story, he's telling you also that we're trying things. A crisis worker in communication center, if we can stop 3 or 4 officers from having to go to a call so they can go to that accident, go to the robbery. And I'm just going to use the analogy is, our frontline officers don't take their lunches. They're working through calls, and, when we talk about losing officers, we know President Woolley and I have chatted, and I know Chair and Mr. Bowden, you've chatted. Quality of life is important for all of our people, and we hate to lose them to suburban and rural communities where they can get a lunch. So these are things that are all part of it. But while we're doing that, we're absolutely committed to it. And you've seen that through the implementation of a community safety well-being strategy. Even Anthony's technology presentation is rooted in that. The platforms that we brought are intended to allow our people to work better, smarter, and allow our community to also access resources. Mark mentioned to you, we reallocated people to safer roads teams. And, without a doubt, that's just a little bit of what we're doing. The divisional mobilization teams are powerful. They're a work in progress. We know that 200 people in Peel are responsible for 2,000 calls for service chronically. And if we can off-ramp them, that helps a little bit. The pilot, as you've seen in our budget for special constables, we've heard the need, people wait days sometimes for us to come for low priority calls, which, as we know, is not right. And a fully sworn officer is needed in a lot of other places. The application of special constables to do extremely low tier calls for service. And Chair Chadha, we were there, you saw a cruiser, blocking an intersection and asked, what's that officer doing? And, sometimes we can better use our resources that way. And I could easily walk through all the activities that we're doing. We're on a road aspirationally to be the most innovative, progressive police organization there is in Canada. I'm telling you, we're going to do that. And at the same time, we have to meet some of the needs that we've heard from our community here behind us. Work continues. There's a lot more to do. And we are absolutely, pot committed to doing that here for you and for this region. The growth statistics, as I mentioned to you, we've seen in the 10 years, the number of additional housing we're seeing projected for Bill 23, Mississauga 120,000 and Brampton 113,000, and that's addition to what we've had permanent-wise. But Carolyn, I think you've looked at it. Our population growth rate is projected in the next 10 years a 24% increase. So if we just do the math on number of vehicles, households, and we've talked for sure in council about the unofficial vehicles on the road and the unofficial population, if we could get a barometer on that, clearly there are significant pressures organizationally that we need to discuss. And you've seen me, I have veered away from, jars full of bullets, the silhouettes of, victims. We don't believe in, fear mongering at all. It doesn't provide anybody confidence in our abilities to respond to crimes. But here you'll see some of the variances just from 2017. Anthony, mentioned 45% 911 calls, 45%. This is just, it's greater than that, Anthony, isn't it, from 2017? It's 45% just 911.
Sorry, through the chair. It's about 49%, but this is just emergency 911 calls.
The immediate dispatch calls are ones that are a loss of life. It's not even just we need somebody here because there's violent. Mental health calls, you understand the shootings and car thefts over the period of 4 years, 170,000. This budget, as the board knows, is about people and buildings. It really is about people and buildings, if I was to boil it down to two things. We do have the requirements that meet legislative elements such as NG 911 that Anthony has suggested. We do have critical infrastructure that requires continuous updating. And much of that is legacy systems that, as recently as the last month, we've completely changed our computer-aided dispatch system, which has a significant impact on us. Rob and Anthony, thank you for that work. From the regional standpoint, the inflation piece, and Chair Yanika and Councilor Medeiros know this well, has impacted everybody and all the municipalities. A huge contribution to our capital plan. What you will see is really we're deviating from our 10-year capital plan, and we'll get into slides about how that impacts our facilities and properties. But the unique urban environment in Peel is one that requires us to rapidly, aggressively replace our infrastructure. As a reminder, and I will say publicly again, the cop to pop ratio is not the best science. It doesn't really accurately tell the story about how you utilize people. But, while it's valuable, we'll continue to use it. For us to get, just to get to Calgary, for example, would require on spot the hire of 191 officers just to get to the nearest. And that's not even saying Calgary is appropriately resourced. But our, the story we continue to tell is, as being the second largest police agency municipally in Ontario, third largest in Canada community-wise, we have been conservative with how we have asked for hiring of uniform and civilian. The unique population growth that puts us here, and as we've seen, becomes ever more challenging to meet just the day-to-day needs. We have, since 1981, operated with the 4 public-facing police divisions. This is still the same model that we have today. For a long time, it has met our needs, but as is indicated, we've seen a 227% population growth since then. We've maxed out our buildings. If you've come through some of them, which we're about to show you, is that this is Sir Robert Peel when it was built 40 years ago. And I use the analogy, if you do walk through it, it does look like a set from NYPD Blue, if you remember that whole show a long time ago. It houses our 911 call center. It also has an operational police division, which supports, the size of that division is bigger than perhaps 70% of the police organizations in Ontario. There's a lot of officers out of there. We have gone through a comprehensive review of the building. To say poor condition is an understatement. As you know, we've got a plan to revitalize it, and we've extended that as far as we can. The building does need to be replaced, but is one of our priorities. Carrie Lynn will speak to this slide. Thank you.
Thank you. So I know we've mentioned this before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. 94% of our budget is made up of our salary and benefits, right? That's directly related to the people and the core of our service. But what that means is there's very little other funding available for support costs. I know our finance committee, the board members who are part of that, are actively involved. And as Mr. Boughton mentioned, we meet throughout the year, and we take the time to review things in a little bit more depth, so that when things are coming to the board as a whole, they know that things have already been discussed and vetted. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to maybe explain to the board members some of those processes that we do undertake, just for some assurance that we do take our financial responsibility very serious. So as Mr. Boughton mentioned, pretty much as soon as the one budget is approved, we start working on the next budget. So our financial analysts within our finance department work with the cost center managers, and they do an in-depth line-by-line review of both our operating and capital budgets. So we look for opportunities to reduce budgets where we can, but to also reallocate funding for new initiatives if we're able to do so. But what's happening is we've been doing this process for so many years. There's very little funding left to reallocate. But I wanted to assure the board that it is a very in-depth process, and we do continually look for improvements and ways for efficiencies, but we're getting to the point where they're getting a little slim. So all this to say that we have 6% left for our operating budget for other costs. And that's for things like our fuel, our auto parts for our vehicles, law enforcement supplies, and uniform and equipment for our officers. Also for services such as utilities and repairs and maintenance of equipment. And lastly, reserve contributions. So you can see on the right now how in the past we've found ways to reallocate staffing and move them around to address the pressures that we face. But similarly to our operating budget, we're getting to the point where we're just not able to find those positions to reallocate to our new priorities. I do assure you, though, that we do, every time something comes up, the questions are asked of, do we need that person? Could they be used in a different way? And we do reallocate where we can, but it's getting tight to meet our pressures. So our 2023 operating budget. So to continue to advance our strategic priorities to serve our community, we're asking for resources to address the pressures that we're facing. But before the chief gets into some of those staffing requests, I'm going to provide you with some context as it relates to the 4.1% base budget requirements. So mainly, 3% of this is in relation to cost of living. So that's tied to the increases in our collective agreements, as well as inflation. And as we mentioned, everybody's seeing the impacts of inflation. And we're seeing increases, obviously, in cost of fuel and some of our maintenance agreements. We're also seeing impacts, and we've kind of touched on this with some of the vacancies that communications are faced with. But our front line is we've seen pressures related to WSIB. So in 2016, there was legislation introduced whereby if a police officer is diagnosed with PTSD, it's presumed that that is from their employment. So we've been able to manage this since 2016. We've seen increased people going off long-term on this, but we've come to a point now where we need to address it and we need to add funding for that. And lastly, these operating increases, they are offset by some additional revenues. So we're seeing some increased revenue related to P duty fees, as well as some grant funding. So Chief, I'll hand it over to you for the staffing.
Thank you, Caroline. From a uniform perspective, I think the board will be aware that on an annual basis, we've factored in, probably an additional 26 to 25 a year. This year's ask represents a real need. Based on my observations in the last 3 years, we not only have needed more officers on a day-to-day basis, we have spent some time with Director Maroney and his analytical team to look at where we should be at today. We suspect that based on the rate of growth that we have not probably kept up with, and as well as the urban pressures that we're seeing, just today alone, we would anticipate 303 officers required just to meet day-to-day needs today, let alone the growth in this region. We clearly cannot, from a practical standpoint, onboard 303 officers, let alone from a budget standpoint. But our proposal for the board is over the next 2 to 3 years to have an aggressive staffing. And we do understand that in year 3 or 4 out, Mr. Bowden, we've chatted about the anticipation of the impact of another collective bargaining, which would affect our base budget. Without a doubt, 70 officers, next year will improve our ability to respond to some of these pressures that we're hearing. It will not resolve things in 1 year. And I just want to be clear to the board and the community that this will not be the panacea for all of our pressures, but will be clearly what we need. And especially when we move on to talking to you about a new division, the resources there. And I think, thank you for your indulgence for me to spend a little time talking about the why, because I understand our community is also watching and listening. I think it's important for me to ensure that when we speak to the 50 civilians, we have not hired for the last 2 years based on the previous slide and have deferred many positions. Anthony, quite appropriately, has spoken to some of the pressures for skilled responses in 911 Communication Center. The 18 special constables will go specifically to alternative service delivery on our front line, which we have seen as a success in our pilot. Clearly, the deputies can help expand on that, and that will help us deal with low priority calls. So we're seeing that as an alternative, but it's not in lieu of an officer, just to be clear. Our officers are needed elsewhere for greater priorities. The scenes of crime officers and the 18 civilian professionals have a variety of responsibilities to support the ongoing work that we are doing. We have spent a lot of time, I know, with the board, and thank you, Vice Chair Atia, for questions as it pertains to what does data and metrics look like for our public when they say and see that we are asking for these officers. We recognize that we need to be good stewards of the bodies we get. Absolutely, it will allow us to improve our response. But, for a realistic, the 70 officers, represent maybe 1 or 2 per shift per region. That is an increase, conceptually for boots on the ground, but it also allows us to enhance our upstream capacity for investigation into things like the auto theft, organized crime. We are one of the only 2 police agencies that have a dedicated auto theft team, but it's only 5 people, right, or 6 people, which is, when you think about, the complexities of the issues that we're proposing. This all allows us to and Chair Unica, you mentioned it, intimate partner violence, youth. We want officers. If we were to ask for people to go back in schools, we don't have those officers anymore. They're absorbed into the rest of this organization. So we appreciate the language around that. The third bullet point says it's our commitment to still finding ways to get upstream. We still need, if Canadian Mental Health Association and the Ministry of Health granted, say, let's just say it's a utopian scenario where they gave David Smith dollars to increase our crisis response teams, we would have to meet them halfway with an officer. And we still want to keep space for those things that are on it. So this is, as the board has mentioned earlier, a delicate balance of where we put our resources. And we are, and as your chief, I'm confident that this need is immediate. As we move into the budget discussion, it does have an element of the capital ask. As I said, it's people and buildings. As you know, and as the long-term facilities plan has been articulated, is the new division in the north. The 10-year capital plan, as we continue to roll into it, also speaks to the densification in Mississauga that will require a south division. It's no secret as we as a team continue, and Staff Superintendent Shearer has had discussions with Direct Carly Farrow at Trillium Health Partners. We know there's a building of a new hospital. What are the opportunities for us to co-locate, especially with the densification down south? This is all part of our 10-year capital plan. Anthony has spoken to it before, and Staff Superintendent Shearer has spoken to it. We are and will be building a new operational support facility, which will house a new 911 communication center, all the infrastructure supports, as well as some operational entities inclusive of road safety. The planning is underway, and completion is expected in 2027. As we mentioned with Sir Robert Peel, that location is so critical to us. It's right across the road from the Davis Courthouse. It is obviously in need of replacement. The redevelopment plan of this site is a multi-year process, which would, as proposed in the plan, in 2024, the building will be planning for a new central holding facility, which is for prisoners. We have a large region, and its proximity to the courthouse makes that an optimal location, as well as evidence forensic services. And we can never walk away from a patrol division at that site, but it will be the location of a new 22 division, which would need to be built. Lastly, the new building for a corporate development, which is our training facilities, which is what we call training facilities, is on this site. Many of you have gone to Dairy Road, and you'll have it find a hard time finding a parking spot there because of all the operations that are in there. So again, this is all part of our 10-year capital plan, and Carrie Lynn will speak to you about that capital budget as it's contained for 2023.
Yes, thank you, Chief. So on this slide, you'll see the breakdown of the 2023 capital budget totaling $847 million. As can be expected, the largest portion of this is related to our facilities. And as you've heard, we require investment in our facilities to replace this aging critical infrastructure and to handle the growth within our community. As our reserves were inadequate to fund our new facilities infrastructure, we've worked with staff at the Region of Peel in regards to our investment in our new facilities. So to support the growth and investment in this critical infrastructure, there's a requirement of $6.2 million in operating funding in 2023 to support the 2023 capital budget. But in addition to that, we require investments to allow our people to do their jobs, to respond to the needs of our community. Funding has been allocated for technology advancement and replacement of existing systems, as well as equipment and vehicles, and our communications and our voice communication system. So our VCOM system is a partnership with the city and the region, amongst some other partners, for our radio communications that our officers have. And lastly, there is a capital project relation to the airport division, but just to mention that that is fully funded through the Greater Toronto Airports Authority.
So for the board, I want to thank you for the opportunity to publicly present our budget for 2023. I think you'll agree that the diversity and the challenges are all opportunities for us here in Peel. And I think we want to give you the greatest confidence that you have a team that has been thoughtful about its needs and pressures. We do hear the community's needs. We hear it from our members, civilian and sworn. This budget certainly provides us the opportunity in 2023 to meet some of the challenges of a growing population and a diverse population. By no means will it always meet all the needs, and we are continuing to strive to make sure that this budget allows us to also be innovative, flexible, and do the things that put Peel Police on the map. And I think we want to assure the community that, we've been very thoughtful in the last 3 years in my observations of being here, but without a doubt, the time is now and upon us to really ensure that we invest in our people and as well as our critical infrastructure. And with that, I want to thank you and the board for the opportunity to speak. And if there are any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Chief and Carolyn and everybody else. And we have, obviously, there's the number of comments. To begin with, we have Mr. Al Boughton first, and then we have Regional Chair Nando Nick after. Thank you.
Nando likes to say he's got his Nandoisms, and I'm learning from him. One of the things that I always say is a person doesn't quit their job or quit the company, they quit their boss, or they quit the environment that they're working in. We are so blessed in Peel, Chief, because of you and this senior management team, where you've created this fabulous environment for their officers with your community safety and well-being plan. Our 64 officers that are on the partner violence unit now, whose great work is not measured by a statistic like we put up on the screen here. It's because they prevent bad things from happening. And we're using the resources so well because of this great environment at Peel Regional Police. I can tell you, the time that I spend here, every minute that I spend with you, Nish, and your team is quality time because we're going the right way. But having said that, we're so fortunate that we do have good retention. And last week, being at the Ontario Association of Police Services Board, there's a whole file that was given to us, which I have with me, that shows what a copper gets paid in Barrie. And I'm going to use Barrie as an example because it's not part of the Big 12. A copper in Barrie makes more money than a copper makes in Peel. It's not a lot more. It's $10 or $20 a week or whatever it is. But the point being that to have an environment that's stressful for everyone at the 911 and the officers' boots on the ground, we need to make sure that we support everyone in the service by right-sizing the number of officers that we have, sworn and civilian. We need to right-size that going forward. And I'm so happy you brought up that 303 number, and we talked a lot about it, that we need to understand that there's no right time to do the wrong thing, and there's no wrong time to do the right thing. Today, we need to do the right thing, and the right thing is to strengthen PRP with the sworn and civilian in order to support all those that are already there and support our community. And when we look at our population growth and trends, and if you look at the trends that were brought up on auto thefts and frauds and shootings and all that, we need to be there. We as a board, we need to be there for you as you are with us, and to do the right thing for all of PRP, and that's to approve this budget with the 70 officers and 50 civilians. My rant is over. Chair,
Very well
thank
said.
you.
Very well said, Mr. Boughton. Mr. Boughton is becoming more and more wiser ever since he retired from his main. Mr. Nandu, next, please.
Thank you. And Al, thanks to you and the team that put the budget together. I'm honored to absolutely support this budget because I really don't think we have another choice. I put it under the category of daunting data. I go through a lot of data in any given day and over the years that I've been around, but there's certain things that at 35,000 feet stick in my head. It's the stuff that keeps me up at night. So one of them is in the area that we sit now, the greater metropolitan Toronto, Hamilton area. People get lost in percentage growth and exponential, and I don't, you're growing by 17. Well, what does that mean? Here's what it means in layman's terms. In the next 30 years, we will be adding Montreal and Vancouver to the GTHA. That's it. Forget percentages. People kind of get, wow, well, Montreal must have a lot of police officers. Yeah, and we're going to need them. There's no economies of scale. In fact, it's a law of diminishing returns. And then we're throwing Vancouver in for good measure. This is the one that freaks people out even more. We have 1.6 million people in Peel. We're going to grow by 50% in the next 30 years. Do you know what we're adding? Mississauga. I want you to drive through Mississauga, look at it and say, well, it's pretty big and Burley. We're giving you another Mississauga. We're just going to put it on top of Mississauga and Brent. Think about that. That's what's coming. And the last piece of the puzzle is the Premier's made it very, very clear that we're also going to build 1.5 million homes. The lion's share of which will be built in Peel. We will be taking the greatest percentage of all of them in the province, which leads to our biggest concern as it relates to policing and the biggest challenge that we are going to have. Others are going to have the same problem. As it relates to all this growth, for the first time that I've been around in 34 years, getting your land approved for development, probably going to be pretty easy. The province is going to make sure of that. Zoning your land is not going to. It's building it, servicing it, getting a pipe, getting a road, getting a sewer. Notwithstanding that it is going to be tens of billions of dollars, if the money rained out of the sky, we don't have the people that can build it. So now I come to this budget. We need this many officers just to stand still. This is what's coming. And the problem we have is there's no just-in-time delivery service for officers. So I can't wait 3 years into this and say, oh, look, we've had the big bump. And so let's go to the officer's store and buy some. Doesn't work that way. You've got to line them up at the college to get them through the system. We've got to start lining them up to get them through the system because it's already too late. So this is why we have to be very, very aggressive for the growth alone that is coming. I'm saying to stand still. Let's put it to not fall further behind. Let's put it that way. And that's why I commend you and the chair, and it's time for bold action. And this is our new normal given the growth. And if we don't queue it up now, we will, because don't forget, everybody else, just like my water sewer now, everybody else, Caledon, Brampton, Ottawa, St. Cat, they're all going to want pipes and roads as well. They're all going to want officers as well. We'd better get in line now and start ramping up so that we will have the police services that our people expect in the years to come. And you've got to do that work now, and this budget does that, and many more to come to look like it. So well done to the team, and I will be strongly endorsing this to my council colleagues as well. Chief, to you and the team, well done.
Thank you, Chair.
Very well said, Regional Chair, perfectly. Obviously, as we talked about it, oftentimes when someone says, oh, why there's no more police officers, it's not that I'm doing something and I need some more bodies and I'll say, okay, come here, I need some help. It's not that someone is sitting there somewhere, or put some clothes on and show up. That doesn't work that way here. There's a plan, and I'm glad that the board is unanimously moving forward. Next I have in line is Vice Chair Atia to speak.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Bowden, for leading the Finance Committee. There was a comprehensive process with the folks at Peel Police to come to this budget. When we approved the 2022 budget, it was very clear to me that we were going to have to catch up. That was a strong message last year from the board. And I've taken the time to review the budget, to be part of the process, and I have some remarks to share. As a board member, I've spent the last 4 years listening to residents, business owners, community leaders about their thoughts on policing. And the truth is, whenever you speak to someone from the community or from the business sector, everybody's message is that they want to feel safe. They want to feel safe when they're at home. They want to feel safe when they go to work, when they're at their place of worship, or when they simply take their family to the park. And so as a board member, when we make critical decisions, whether it's a strategic plan or today, the budget, the thought process for me as a board member is not simply about the dollar amount, but rather about how the budget will impact how we do policing and the outcomes that comes out of that. And so our role as a board is not solely focused on fiscal responsibility, as some may argue and believe, or on defunding the police in order to redirect funds to other services. Rather, our role is to ensure that Peel residents receive adequate policing. And in the last 4 years, our board has really focused on redefining Peel Police with our partner, our chief, Durapa. And we're the first to implement in this province community safety and well-being, I think maybe even Canada, and what that means in policing. We're the first to sign an MOU with the Ontario Human Rights Commission to eliminate systemic racism in Peel Police. We have rethought our approach to responding to mental health calls. To reduce the use of force, we have developed human rights training and prioritized de-escalation methods, among many other directives and priorities that we've given the chief and his team. This is how we've approached changing policing methods and changing outcomes. However, it's not without flaws. There's much more work that we need to do. Our new Governance and Human Rights Committee is working on a plan to implement a human rights perspective into the strategic plan, as well as defining an anti-Black racism strategy, which is consistent with the demands of the community. In addition to all of this work, the board has owned and directed this budget. And for many years, we've pushed Peel Police to be more efficient, to rethink how we do our service delivery model and how we're going to meet our priorities. And by doing so, we've reorganized and we've reallocated resources with limited budget increases. Our board was well aware that we would have to catch up, but we would not do so until Peel Police Service demonstrates sufficient progress and modernization towards our strategic plan. And so it's now time to catch up. I strongly believe that. Our region's population is increasing. There's an overwhelming sentiment from the residents of Peel to have a desire for a safer region, improve service to and our response to calls, and have an increased police presence. And so today I will support this budget. And while doing so, my final message is that to the chief and to the deputy chiefs, we must remain committed to always looking forward, embracing the diversity of our region, not being afraid to acknowledge what we are doing wrong and fixing it, and always considering how we can do it better. We need to advocate for strengthening upstream and downstream social services, and we need to make progress on important issues that the community has called on us to do. And so with that, thank you, and I look forward to voting on this budget.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Tia.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Next, we have Ms. Coley to comment.
Thank you to the chair. Again, my kudos and all the hard work that board colleague Al Boughton put into this. I know a lot of work went in on all angles, and it's a very thorough and vetted plan. I do want to recognize, I think today, just the presentations just prior, I mean, if they were not an indication that we're at this place and this needs to happen, I'm not sure, you know, what else we need. And I think one key thing I do want to point out of this budget is, yes, there's the bodies and the individuals, but a big part of that is technology. And it is so critical, I think, you know, Deputy Eduardo, your presentation is just critical to the fact that that has to go hand in hand with everything else we're doing. Because if we don't do that and we don't advance, you know, we're not going to build up to where we need to go. Thank you to Nando also for the update about, you know, like where we're going with our population. If we're not ahead of the curve today, we're going to be catching up, and we're going to always be catching up. So we have a really great opportunity right now to step forward. And I understand that it's just, it might even just get us to where we need to be for today, but at least it allows us to get moving forward. And I think when it comes to things like technology, a lot of the bill that comes in, once you build the infrastructure, a lot of the additional build can keep adding as we evolve. But I think the base has to move up. And I think the other thing that was really valuable that you put out is the fact that based on our population growth, you know, the divisions that we have, they have to be, you know, increased in what they can provide as service levels. Ultimately, what is our role here is to make sure we're servicing the population in the best way possible. So I think if there's no other reason, then today was a really great example and some great deputations that we had to say, we need to do this and we need to move forward. So 100%, I support this budget and I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone has said so many things, and I echo them all, and I agree with them. And so therefore, if no further discussion, I guess I would just need a mover and seconder for this presentation, budget presentation, by obviously Mr. Boughton, second by Ms. Coley. All in favor? This carried unanimously. Thank you. Well done. The next we have in the new business, we have some consent agenda. In accordance with the board's procedure policy, we will now move into the consent motion for the consent agenda. The consent agenda deals with the items considered routine. Thank you very much. Do any member wish to remove any item from the consent? Seeing, hearing none. I can move a motion to approve items 4 to 5. May I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councilor Madero, seconded by Ms. Coley. All in favor? This is carried. We will now move into the new business. The Police Services Board 2023 proposed schedule for Section 31 meetings. Do any members have any questions before approve the schedule? May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Vice Chair Atia, seconded by Mr. Boughton. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Item number 7, police reported crime statistics in Canada 2021. Chief, would you like to speak on this?
Deputy Oduardi will comment on that report.
Thank you. Through the chair, the figures that you see in the report, I will just summate as Peel being one of the safest regions in Canada with a population that's over 800,000 people. And our crime severity index indicates that through various metrics that have been provided to you. So although it takes some time to get to a call, the solvency rates, the response and crime severity index indicates that Peel is a very safe region.
Thank you, Anthony.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Seeing none, can I have someone to move the report? Martin, seconded by Nando. That has been carried. We go to the next item, number 8. See, I become chair, everything starts flowing. Just joking. Supply and delivery of soft body armor. Chief, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you. I can probably do this very quickly. We have a purchasing agreement for body armor, which is a requirement under our regulations. We are going to head into negotiation into the new year. This amount allows us to just bridge the gap till we go into renegotiations. We are in a cooperative purchasing agreement right across Ontario, which saves us hundreds of dollars per body armor. And Mark, I don't want to top that up, or if I hit the nail on the head there.
Yes, Chief, you've hit the nail right on the head.
Any questions from the board? Okay, moved by Nando, seconded by Al. All in favor? Okay, and it's been moved. Number 9, supply of internet and cloud services for Peel Regional Police. Chief, would you like to speak to that?
Anthony?
Okay, thank you. We heard today that the demand for data is as important in policing, in fact, in all aspects as voice communications. The requirement for our data has never been higher, given the implementation of not just smart devices technologies, next generation 911 body-worn cameras, in-car cameras, systems, and ALPRs coming. They all add to the need to be able to move that data and store it. We have a thorough DEMS, digital evidence management strategy, but the internet base on being able to move that data is very critical. Canada, if you are a resident of Canada, you pay the highest data rates in the entire universe. And this partnership that we have embarked on with Sheridan College leverages a partnership that Sheridan College has with a film industry in Toronto, which has access to the highest gigabyte speed and performance in the country at a fraction of the cost. And so this is a cost avoidance strategy for us as we look to increase our need for data and the ability to move it. We've partnered with Sheridan College and expect that our expense of $650,000 over the next 5 years will lead to a cost avoidance of about $500,000, but even more impressive, provide us with an increased amount of speed and storage over those 5 years. I think that's basically it. And I would say that the reason this has come for decision before the board is because it is to provide directly to Sheridan College a contract for that amount to be able to leverage this amazing opportunity.
Thank you. Any comment from the board? If not, we have a mover to approve these recommendations by Ms. Coley, seconded by Councillor Medeiros. All in favor? This is carried unanimously. So this concludes the public portion of the Peel Police Services Board meeting. At this, this is the last meeting of 2022. I would like to thank everyone for your contribution throughout the year, and a special thank you to the members of the community that have participated throughout this current year. We will adjourn for quick 5 minutes, and then we will be back in camera portion. Thank you very much.